Is it stressful doing a book?
Yes. It's funny you say that, because I was literally only yesterday, I'm so stuck on the update for that, because it actually, in a lot of ways, updating an existing book and stitching together different stuff into it is harder than starting with a blank sheet of paper on a new book, like genuinely. And I've had to do all these editing jobs recently of like stuff that's been around for years but needs updating because the rules have changed or whatever, and that is such a brain strain. Because you're like, what should I put in? What should I know?
I've heard a lot of people say it's like running a marathon.
Honestly, so I said to my wife, she thinks I'm full of shit, obviously, but I said to my wife, I said, honestly, I've done, this is a bit pretentious, right? We should be capturing this gold, right?
Yeah.
Have you started
It's on anyway, yeah, I just normally chop out.
Okay, brilliant. But yeah, she'll love that. Thanks, hun. But I said something like, I reckon I've done 300 intellectual marathons in a row, and she's like, whatever.
It is though.
It's tough. It really is tough.
Mental people don't, obviously we do paint and decorating on site, so it's a physical job, but when we have to come home and get on the laptop
and
prepare
all your stuff,
you feel more knackered than if you were just going to do physical stuff anyway. So it's sort of,
I think that's right. Like when I was, I worked in a bar all through like my late teens, and late shifts, and obviously I was a lot younger and stuff, but I did a paper round for years. I've worked, not as much as you, but I've worked on building sites with mates, dads who had a property contracting firm. Yeah. Although I have to admit, doing that, like shifting gravel for a whole day, at the end of it, you're pretty knackered.
It's graft, it is.
Yeah, it is. But it's just different. Like physical tiredness and mental tiredness are different things. But yeah, I was so literally yesterday. I probably shouldn't admit this. You're going to get this in the can, and then you can either cut it or not.
Yeah.
And my shareholders will be really freaked out. But so yesterday I googled, does writing a book make you stressed? Just because I wanted to go to my wife, go see. And then also, does it make you an alcoholic? It's like basically something like 70% of America's top fiction writers, like John Steinbeck, Ernest Hemingway, Tennessee Williams, they all became massive alcoholics because you're so in your head and you're so stressed, and you get to the end of it and you've had like 7 coffees, and then you're like, and but I'm not an alcoholic, by the way, but you take
a few bottles of vino,
but it's hard. You get to the end of the day and you're just a bit drained.
It's probably the only way to unwind.
Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't be. You could go for a walk and you could play with your children. I think my wife would rather I play with my children than have half a bottle of wine. But anyway, so so is this just we're kicking off with that?
Yeah. We used to just like sit in and then turn it on and then do this big intro, and now we go naturally, and then we kind of come back to do the intro.
So I don't get to ask any questions about the format. Then we'll just do that live. But we
can do it live because I can cut all that out anyway.
And so is that what? How much of an edit do you do then? Is it quite?
I will normally it'll be like 5 minutes. If there's interesting stuff in there, then I'll keep it in.
Yeah.
If it's just like the guest just getting settled down and talking about something that
drinking coffee.
Yeah, I think he probably won't want that in there. It's not worth having in there. Then I'll cut it just straight to when we intro it in. But I do want to talk. We are going to intro it in, but I do just want to quickly ask about the book because I don't want to forget.
Sure.
They say fiction writers as well sometimes wake up at like 3 a.m. because their brain's more active. That's what you say.
About 3:45 this morning, 4:04 yesterday. Well, do you know what? I think it's mainly just I have naturally evolved over the last few years. A lot to do with having kids, and a lot to do with being my own boss as well, right? So I don't have to. Like, I'm never in central London at 8 o'clock at night and getting home at 9:30 because I just choose not to be. So in the old days, I would be. I still had to force myself. I did a job where I had to be in at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week. And now I do that to myself. Why do I do that? But I mean, what was the point of quitting the job? But so I naturally wake up between sort of 5 and 6, but literally 7 days a week because I work Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings at the moment. I'm going to hope to stop doing that soon once these 2 books are done.
Do you find it more easy because it's for yourself, not doing it for someone else?
It's like I can't remember what podcast I was listening to the other day. Like, there's almost no stronger sort of dynamic intellectually for human beings than the grass is greener.
Yeah.
So when I worked 12 hours a day in the city, you thought, being my own boss is going to be amazing. Working from home, total freedom to do whatever you want. And there's a huge amount of that. That's right. But now I'm I literally am in my pants in my home office in my house,
working harder.
But it's also just broadly. So today I've just driven an hour and a quarter to come here. It's one of the funnest things I've done in weeks. Right? Driving on the M25, because basically, I mean, I don't mean that obviously, but I am at home. I go from my bed to the kitchen to my office at home. 90% of my waking hours, I went for a walk with a neighbour at 7:30 this morning, and I was like, blah, blah, like I am now. And he's like, "Dude, you never get to speak to anyone, do you?" I'm like, "No." And literally, I've been writing for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and obviously I do meetings in town and I do stuff like this, and it's not quite that bad. But you do miss, like, to your question, when you've got a job. You go in and you've got, like, if you like your colleagues, you have banter and talk about what happened at the weekend. And my work now is just so intense because from the minute I start, I'm just in my own head and 100% focused on that with no, like, did you watch this on TV or where did you just go on holiday or
tunnel vision.
Yeah. And that's part of the other exhaustion point is that so I try to do 7 or 8 hours of what I call deep work every day, starting at 5 or 6 in the morning. And there's a huge difference between what you feel after doing deep work, like that's writing or a spreadsheet or some sort of analysis or whatever, compared to work that a lot of people do in offices, which is, getting well, exactly. I can swear in this podcast, can't I? Yeah, he's like, fucking
no
around.
Limits.
Yeah, exactly.
No limits podcast. That's what we should call it.
We shouldn't have the C word, though.
People get really offended about that word, man, but Australians just throw it out
mate,
there. They just throw it out there, mate.
They also call you a bastard.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what you do, whether they like you or they don't like you.
But people, welcome to the Curious Fijian. It's the 100th episode. And we couldn't round off 100 without bringing on Andrew Craig, who arguably started the whole journey off with...
Which, I'm super touched, man.
Yeah.
I sort of vaguely knew that, but didn't really know.
Obviously, founder of Plain English Finance, author of How to Own the World. You have your own fund as well.
We've got 2 now.
2 funds.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to just get into your story and just see what got you there and and what kind of motivates Andrew Craig, and hopefully the guests can take out of it what we took out of it, and leave the links for them to purchase your books and stuff like that.
Well, which is brilliant. It's great to be here. And I guess just before we do that though, so this is the 100th episode. You said you've been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think you first got in touch with me longer ago than 2 years ago.
It's probably 4 years. 4 years ago, we were at Kirkwood.
It was, so COVID...
When do you think you read my book? Did you read that version of my book?
Yeah, this version of How to Own the World. Yeah. It was just through... I want to say it was just through COVID. Yeah, it must have been coming out or the start.
I read it at the start.
Or maybe just before COVID
read it
then.
Before.
And obviously Liam George, who's in the group as well, he gave me the book. I was going to get a Mercedes on finance and stuff like that, and then the deal fell through and someone else brought it because I didn't put the holding deposit down. And he was like, look at this book. When I was your age, I would have done the same thing, but read this and see what you think. So he sent me all of your staff previous podcasts you done, the book. So I just got it, read it, told everyone about it, like brother, cousin, everyone, and then we sort of just went down the rabbit hole from there. So yeah, it was probably 2020. I was in the group, maybe 2021, something like that.
Yeah, because so the first version came out in September 2012 as an ebook. We published it ourselves, and then as a print. But Amazon does this print on demand thing called Create Space. So yeah, it's a good thing to know, by the way. Is that you can write a book and just upload it to Amazon, and I guess nowadays people know that more than they did then. But if you have something to say and you're able to do that and get it up in lights. I was very lucky because that was quite successful when we initially published it. And then X years later, I got a call from a big publisher, and they're the ones that did that version in 2019. So, yeah, you read the most up-to-date version not long after it came out.
And then I think I must have joined the group, probably asked you a question or something, because I'm just curious about everything. I'm
curious for Gian.
Yeah. I'll probably ask you a question, but when we were speaking about potentially getting you on and stuff, I think that was 2021.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, so 2 years ago.
It's partly my fault and partly your fault that it took a while. But I'm very glad.
But I've learned. Yeah, I've learned with guests, like, you want them on when you like. So when I ask you, it's sort of like, let's try get it in. But it never really materializes then, and then 6 months later it sort of just materializes out of nowhere, and it's a perfect time.
It's good, so like serendipity, but that's everyone's busy, right?
Yeah.
So you asked me that. I always do this. I have to preemptively apologise to everyone who watched this that if they've watched, I'm really repetitive.
Yeah.
Like there's this very pretentious Latin phrase, repetitio mater studiorum est, which means repetition is the mother of learning. So I kind of almost don't apologise for it, but the other standard cheesy thing where people say, "Oh, tell me about your journey" and stuff, I go, "Well, I'm British, and us Brits hate talking about themselves." And then I basically talk about myself for 20 minutes. Right? Standard operating procedure. Anybody who's watched any of my YouTube interviews will be like rolling their eyes, going, "Oh, he's going about, oh no, I was a stockbroker in New York and blah blah." But I mean, I don't know. It depends what you want to know. But
well, I've got a few questions here, so I'll start off with what was life like growing up for you?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. And I have definitely done this sort of 20-minute one before on a recent video, or not that long ago, whenever it was. But I was very fortunate, my mum worked from time to time, but was mainly kind of a stay-at-home mum. My parents are quite interesting. My dad's Northern Irish. My mum was actually half Kiwi. My grandfather was a New Zealand pilot in the Second World War, and half English. And I guess that's quite, he was a Northern Irish dude who'd moved to England, and she was half Kiwi, and my grandfather actually went back to New Zealand after the Second World War, and she never saw him again. So she was from a single parent home in the 50s and 60s, so that got kind of partly made her the person she was. And I, growing up, I was quite conscious of being kind of a bit weird in that my dad was Irish and my mum was half Kiwi, and wasn't as sort of plain vanilla English as some of the other kids. Not that you know now listening to me speak, obviously, but that is actually important, because we went. I went to Ireland every summer for years and years and years, like in a caravan up in a place called Donegal.
Oh yeah, Donegal,
yeah, it was amazing. Donegal, amazing place. But all that stuff culturally is quite important, because I suppose it, made my parents who they were. But my dad worked for Shell. And because of that, super, super lucky, and I don't think it happens as much anymore, but Shell used to pay school fees at like stupidly expensive, boarding schools for the kids of like middle managers, senior managers at Shell, if they worked overseas. And so my dad worked in the Middle East and Africa and Argentina, and I spent my first 5 years in Australia as a little kid because he was in Australia, which, I think, again, is quite important, sort of informs who I am, right? Slightly unusual and really cool, like going in summer holidays back to Jordan in the Middle East instead of...
Like an English pirate.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can put it that way. Yeah.
Sort of reminds me of when people get into like the military and they get deployed around the
exactly.
world.
So everywhere we were, like Nairobi in Kenya, whatever, it's like all the military kids. Actually, it's people like who work for Shell, people who work for Ford, people who work for British BP or whatever. So. But what that meant is I was very lucky to go to, an expensive boarding school, as you can probably tell from how I speak. It's a very British thing, right? But that, that was, I'm not going to pretend that wasn't a massive privilege, because the education you get, the sports you do, the music you do, how they equip you for like university process and all that stuff, that's definitely important. And so I'm really grateful for that, and, grateful for having a sort of really solid nuclear family and all of that behind me. And so then, So although I didn't get into Oxford or Cambridge, which is God, we probably shouldn't get into that. I sound like a ridiculous bloke saying that. I was so disappointed. But I went to Birmingham Uni to do economics in like the mid-90s, 94. I went there. And when my parents were living in Kenya at the time, so I was sort of on my own in the UK, which was quite cool when I was 19, sort of felt like a very grown up. I've been at boarding school for a few years. But then after that, went to work. My first sort of job was an intern in Congress in America, in the US government. And I think that, like, to study economics at a decent university, there's this series of steps that I'm very lucky to have had. You have a good education, gets you into good university, gets you into whatever. But to go from sort of I was at Birmingham Uni, it wasn't Cambridge or whatever. It was good. It's good uni, got a good degree. But to go from there to being sort of in a top job in the city was tough. Like, that was a big sort of gap to bridge. And I always sort of, I do speak to quite a lot of, whether professionally or subsequently, like a lot of young people, a lot of people have approached me to mentor and stuff over the years. And one of the things I always say is, you got to take baby steps. Like if you're at A and you want to go to B, and B is actually quite a serious thing, you can't just make that leap in one go. And so for me, when I found out I got this, basically every year since about 1919 until a few years ago when Trump blew it up. I don't know, we can come on to that. Why did Trump blow this thing up? But basically, after the First World War, America and Britain were really concerned that America had taken ages to get involved with the First World War, which then happened again in the Second World War. But they set up this thing called the English-Speaking Union, which was supposed to sort of foster better collaboration between English-speaking nations. And the English-speaking Union had been sending 12 Brits to Washington, D.C. for a summer internship program for years and years, and 12 Americans to Westminster, and sort of exchange. And I got one of those in 1997. And that was an amazing, that was just, you go from here and then you're coming back for interviews with all the people I wanted to get jobs with saying, oh, what did you do this summer? It's like, oh, actually, I wrote speeches for a US congressman. And that changed. But also, in terms of them becoming an author and all the stuff, a lot of the stuff I've done since then is stuff that is a very long shot. Why would you spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours working on something that may or may not be successful unless you're slightly mad, or unless you've had an experience in the past where, some of the stuff we got to do in Washington is just you'd never ever believe you'd get to meet that person. Or I met congressmen who marched with Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
I saw the Mars landings so it's just opening the world of possibility to believe that things that 5 years ago I thought there's no way I will ever get to do that. When you have a couple of them happen, it just nudges you into a thing where you just think, I'm going to have a crack at that. And then, that...
It's sort of like you coming here today.
What do you mean?
Like you coming here today was like a surreal moment. We read your book and it's like, wow, you've opened this possibility.
And a few years later...
now you're on our podcast. It's like, bloody hell, wow. I guess
you've had that...
right direction.
You must have had that with a lot of your guests, right? Is that, sometimes you approach... all the podcasts that... People who do podcasts, it's hard reaching out to get guests and stuff. People are busy and whatever else, like you were saying a minute ago. But on the flip side, it's amazing how just asking the question, you'd be surprised at sort of who. I'm not some celebrity or anything, obviously, but that is, it's just putting yourself out there and approaching people. And that people, my experience is just how often. So certain members of my family are very, or cynical people I know will say, basically rich people are arseholes, for example, billionaires or multi. In my experience, because of my career, I've met a lot of very wealthy, very successful people, like a few billionaires and a lot of people worth 100 million plus over the years. And almost without exception, they've been incredibly generous with when they can, they're incredibly generous with their time. And they don't pull the ladder up after them. They, when people become very wealthy, so they don't have to worry about working, an awful lot of them, go on to then, what they want to do is change the world and shape the world the way they want it. So they start businesses, they get involved with charities, or that's kind of at the macro level, or at the micro level, they give a lot of time and effort to somebody that they think is worth giving a time and effort to. So yeah, that's a feature of working, because I was in the city as a plain vanilla stockbroker. So basically, I'd wake up in the morning and we were trying to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for EasyJet, or one of my favorite ones ever was Hit Entertainment, which was listed on the London stock market, owned Bob the Builder. So I went around Europe with DVDs, back in the days of DVDs, little portable, showing very serious German farmers. Hello, this is Bob the Builder. Bob the Builder. And they'd sit there and then they'd write you a $10 million check.
Yeah.
Because we raised $300 million pounds for Hit Entertainment to acquire Barney the dinosaur. So that was the sort of stuff that I used to get to do. I don't know why I went off.
Figures is mad.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, I was just saying that. So as a stockbroker, so one day I'll be doing EasyJet, one day I'll be doing Bob the Builder. Every sector, hundreds of different companies, traveling with really sort of senior people. And
so what was your role in it? You had to sell the product.
Yeah,
or help sell.
So basically, and it's all changed over the years, but for many decades since the stock market, it sort of evolved that basically there's a role called an analyst. So an analyst will become an expert on a few companies. So they're usually sectoral. So they'll be an expert on telecom companies or software companies or retail companies or brewers or whatever. And an analyst will then write research, and the research will basically say Bob the Builder is raising 300 million quid to buy this purple dinosaur from the States called Barney the dinosaur because it will double the business and make the business better. Or EasyJet need to buy 50 new 737s, which is going to cost X $100 million, and we need to raise that money. And isn't EasyJet great? 10 years ago it had 2 planes, now it's got 150 planes, right? And so the Analyst writes a detailed piece of research. And when I was at Swiss Bank, which was where I started, I think we covered more than 1,000 companies just in Europe, in the UK and Europe. Like we wrote research on 1,000 companies in Stockholm, Oslo, Madrid, Paris, Frankfurt, and obviously London, everything else. And that was probably, from memory, it was like 100 analysts. So they're probably averaged about 10 companies each. And then the job of my job is to every morning distill all of that. Like, what are we saying in Switzerland? What are we saying in Milan? And then call up people that have £1 billion or a few £100 million, which would be traditional investment firms you would have heard of, like Schroders or Aviva or Legal & General, the big insurance companies, and also the big hedge funds, which are more private entities that will buy something today and sell it next week, and say, look, we think you should put some money into this EasyJet deal, or you should be selling you should be selling Marks and Spencer's because nobody buys Marks and Spencer's clothes anymore, right? And so that's the only thing sort of go on about that is it's really interesting because when I joined the city in the late 90s, that was like a really good career. And it's like, because another topic I guess we come on is just how much of a role chance plays. Like you make your own luck to a certain extent through work, and I'm a big believer in that, but you can't legislate for the world does stuff as well. And when in the time that I started doing that, it was like, wow, I've got a job at Swiss Bank doing this, and ever since then it's just only gone one way, which is the wrong way, which is why I sort of don't do it anymore. and it for good reasons, right? But I perhaps don't go down the rabbit hole of why that is, but basically, the people who have the money have become much more professional over the last 30 years. So they don't need some muppet like me saying, you should buy EasyJet. They've already got airlines analysts who knows much more about the airlines than I do. So there's kind of...
they've got their own team in-house.
They've got their own team in-house. And that has its own, in some ways that has its own problems. It's a shame that thing's... Because the other reason it's changed is you guys know what an ETF is, right? Passive funds. And... maybe we can come on to this as a topic. I think this is really dangerous, is that, so the percentage of passive funds are really good. Like if people who don't invest first want to learn about investment, they just buy a passive fund on the S&P 500 on the MSCI World. Maybe we can get into the detail of what that is, but you guys know what that is. You've read the book. That's a great, inexpensive, sensible way to just get exposure to the world. But because like passive is just basically is the 800-pound gorilla that's taken on everything. There's passive just happens automatically. Like nobody's actually stopping things. Should we buy this company today? Or it's just like if $100 billion goes into an S&P 500 ETF, it just gets sprayed into Apple, Nvidia, Facebook, whatever, automatically, and that's potentially really problematic for capitalism and sort of for human progress in the future. Which maybe is a slightly esoteric subject.
We will dive into that stuff. I do want to get into that sort of stuff.
There you go. What did I tell you? You asked me a question, 15 minutes of nonsense
later. I like that when the guest just goes, man. You've got to let them go sometimes.
Exactly.
So with the economics, when did you know you wanted to do economics? Did you always know as a kid growing up? Like, was you interested in finance a lot? Like, when did you actually find out?
What I really wanted to do was make bad house music in my Logic Platinum recording studio. Sadly, I couldn't make any money. No, Christian, not a DJ, a producer.
Yeah.
But most of the stuff I ever produced was really bad.
So you could produce some stuff now. Let's throw some stuff out.
It'll take me a few hours. I'm not actually. I definitely won't play any of my stuff because my wife will never speak to me again. But no, you know what? I've said this before. So bless him. My dad used to sort of on a Sunday morning, the dreaded right. Come here, and we'd like read The Economist together when I was like literally 10, and I'd be like, what? It's politics and current affairs and all this stuff. And I mean, he, to be fair to him, he just wanted to cultivate an interest in the world in me. And I guess gradually I found myself actually getting into it. And then at school doing economics A level. And I think if you were to ask me like one thing that I'm all about, well, I guess writing is a key thing. I write a lot. Like I was working out the other day, I reckon I've done more than 1 million words in the last few years of written stuff. But to do that, the one thing is reading. Like, if there's one thing I think sets you apart in life, is reading, and just reading tons and tons of books, because the information in long form books is much better quality than in short form stuff like TikTok or the press, or the news, right? The news, something really bad happened.
Quick hits.
Yeah, it doesn't give you. It's no use to, exactly right, and it's no use to you at all. Like, knowing what's happening in Israel right now, it just makes everyone more depressed and gives everyone a distorted state of the world. Because yesterday, 99. Well, 100%. So the news is, I mean, we're going all over the show.
Go. It's the curious VG, man. We're curious boys around here.
But awesome. but and definitely shut me up if you want to. If I just spear off too many different threads. But Elon Musk has a great quote, and I'm not some huge Elon Musk fanboy. I think it's quite amazing what he does. I think there's a chance he'll be bankrupt 10 years from now. We'll see how it goes. But hats off to him for trying. But he a brilliant quote that I think encapsulates something that takes me 5,000 words to explain in a long form article is the news tries to answer the question, what is the worst thing that happened in the world today? And the really crazy thing about that is nobody thinks about that. Like, everybody's like, oh, I watch the news. I listen to the news on the radio. It's like a natural thing that a lot of people do, particularly, the younger generation are perhaps falling out of it a bit, but it's almost, in some ways, it's worse because they're not consuming long form news from the BBC or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. They're taking stuff from some TikTok Twitter. Or Facebook or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
It's like on Twitter. You go on there, you see one video of someone getting something happening to someone, or some man beating up a woman.
There's no analysis, and everyone's angry, and it's just toxic, like crazy toxic. And because actually, factually, right, if you went and empirically analysed, like scientifically, what percentage of hours spent by human beings yesterday were neutral to good in the world, right? Of the, how many, 8 billion people on the planet, 24 hours each, what percentage of that 8 billion times 24 hours spent by all of us was like okay or good? Like, going to a restaurant with your mates, watching a movie with your mates, playing sport, going to the gym, parents dropping their kids to school, mums going for coffee mornings, whatever. Like, just insert thousands of just going to work, talking to your mates, going to the pub, whatever. It's probably 99.9+% of stuff that happened in the world yesterday, even in Mogadishu, and probably not so much in Israel right now, in Gaza, right? Obviously, or Yemen or something. But from 99.9% of the world's population yesterday basically had an okay to good day, right? But the news makes everybody think that it's the other way around. The news makes everyone think that 99.9% of the stuff that happened yesterday is really bad. Like,
has it always been that way? Obviously, we're obviously a lot younger, so we're not really on the news really that much.
But it's fair to say from your when you guys are particularly, you've got this podcast, you're very proactive, you're the curious Virginia and everything else, and so you're perhaps not the way, because the one good thing about social media is you can curate it. Like, you can take from it what you want more. So if you watch the BBC News, it's like, here are the 8 things we've decided to tell you about today. Yeah. This terrible thing happened. This shit thing happened. Yeah. These people died. This disease went here, and this government minister's wanker. That's like, they've decided that those are the 8 terrible things you're going to hear about in the half an hour from whenever to whenever. But with social media, you can more proactively curate it. And you guys are probably doing a much better job than the average person with that, right? Because of the sorts of people you are. But I would still say that most social media news is still angry, negative, pessimistic.
100%.
One of the really good examples that I get into in my new book, the next one that's coming out, is like, so Greta Thunberg, Alexandria Cortez, or whatever, Ocasio-Cortez is this American congresswoman. All these people who, so environment, like, the environment is a problem. Global warming is a problem, right? Right? But it is not, as a statement of fact, going to kill us all in 4 years' time unless we all have Teslas.
But is this another narrative? Yeah, it's another narrative for these bigger players.
But this is great. We can get into 8 million things and not finish any of them. But this is another narrative I really hate. I'm going to write a piece in the next few months called "There's no such thing as there is no they." There is no them. Like the conspiracy theory, like there's a bunch of rich, greedy Swiss dudes like Klaus Schwab or whatever, and the Rothschild family and the Queen, who's actually a lizard, like whatever. There's a bunch of elite people who've all got together and decided they're going to fuck over everyone and take all the money and, scare everyone with an. It's not that. Like if you ever have been involved with institutions like big companies or investment banks or anything, right? When you put groups of people together, they become stupid. Like it's a well-known, stupid decisions get made. There's sort of all these problems with institutional inertia, or so it's not. There's no way that the Japanese government and the Chinese government and the European governments and the American governments could possibly collaborate to perpetrate COVID on us or any of these things, right?
So you're not with the sort of conspiracy like the World Economic Forum are trying to sort of kill the world off. And
it's really funny you say that, because I was thinking I need to read The Great Reset, actually, because I haven't actually read it, the book that Charles Schwab's Swiss mate wrote. But I just think, like, even if they are, and Bill Gates is actually a lizard, and even if these people are trying to do that, there's no way they're going to be able to do it. Because the world is so complicated and pluralistic, and
it's only one side of the world as well.
Well, exactly. But if you just think about, for example, so the number of times I hear people say the stock market or financial markets are rigged, right? Like anybody spent 10 minutes on a trading floor will say there are elements of it that are dishonest. There are people trying to manipulate markets. But, you got a big company, even a company that's only like 1 or 2 billion, let alone an Apple that's 2 or 3 trillion or 3 trillion-ish now. It will have hundreds, if not thousands, of shareholders, right? So if you're going to try and manipulate that, you basically have to get all of the shareholders to agree, or
all on the same level.
Yeah, and in a very, very small company, you could do that. But I had this argument with somebody a few years ago who reckoned that a particular acquisition of a oil and gas company had been rigged, right? I've been screwed over. It's like, okay, this company's got 650 investors on all time zones in the world. So what you're suggesting must have happened is that they must have been able to, basically hundreds of people would have been able to do a conference call across San Francisco, London, New York, Boston, Tokyo, Seoul, Korea, to all of whom have been breaking the law.
Yeah.
It's just not like...
But then you got like the other argument would be like the Nancy Pelosi thing, like with the insider trading, and is that sort of a thing that does happen?
I think it does happen, and Martha Stewart as well. Yeah, and there are lots of bad actors. I just think
she plays it though.
Well, she does it. She owns it. She says it.
No, Nancy or Pelosi. Right? Yeah,
but then, can you blame him if he's there to be rigged?
Yeah, no. But I think you can. I think anybody. I mean, there's a certain. I think America. I'll be a bit careful what I say because I'm a big fan of America. I spent 2.5 years of my life in America, but there's this. I think a lot of Europeans, when they think about being successful financially, they know what enough is. Like a lot of Europeans, sort of philosophically, we can be. If you're quite wealthy, that's great. But if you're Italian, you're going to focus on food and wine and whatever. But in America, there's a very particular it's never enough. Like there's this sort of we don't want to be worth billion. If you're worth $1 billion, you're still not happy because somebody else worth $2 billion. And I think you can even sort of verify that with sociological work that says that that's part of the psyche. So and I definitely would agree that you do come across examples of unbelievably greedy, corrupt. By the way, to be clear, for anybody American watching this, they exist elsewhere in the world too. But I think it's a particularly American malaise. Like that movie Erin Brockovich with the Pretty Woman lady Julia Roberts. She made this great movie called Erin Brockovich. It won the Nobel Prize, the Oscar, slightly different. And it was basically about this American chemical company that was poisoning people and giving thousands of people cancer. And it's a true story about this woman called Erin Brockovich who won like hundreds of millions of dollars of compensation for their families. And I think that sort of stuff used to happen a lot in America. I think it happens a bit less now. But, this is what I always come back to is yesterday in the London stock market or the New York stock market, of the X 100,000 trades that happened, how many of them were actually insider trading or corrupt? It's a tiny percentage. Not least because most trades today are conducted by bots that are trading with each other, algorithmic, which is another thing, you know, which is potentially problematic. If you've read Michael Lewis's Flash Boys, by the way, read that book.
Good book.
It's like the insight that if there are, what is it, 1,000, I don't know if it's 1,000 or 1,000,000 milliseconds, it must be 1,000,000, because there are basically more milliseconds between 2 seconds than there are days since the birth of Christ, right? And if a hedge fund is able to trade within those milliseconds, whilst everyone else, like you and me, is only able to trade every second, they can basically get in, buy, get out, sell,
get out in the milliseconds.
Before you've blinked, right? Yeah. And that has been read the Michael Lewis book, Flash Boys. Flash Boys, unbelievable. Yeah. Anyway, where was I going? But notwithstanding all of that, yeah. But there's this idea that, you know, everyone in the city is corrupt, everyone's insider. It's just bollocks, complete bollocks. And like anyone who's worked for a while on a trading desk will tell you. I mean, professionally, like if I was dishonest to my clients, my career would have been over. Yeah. Like if one time one of your clients thinks you've tried to fuck them over, well, they'll never deal with you again. So like, you
lose that rep.
Yeah, it's not necessarily because, you know, I think there are lots of really moral people who work in financial markets and get pretty pissed off with the rest of the world, thinking they're all greedy, unethical assholes, right? You know, definitely had first experience of that. But it's almost, you don't actually need to be a good, moral, ethical person. You're forced to be by the way it works. So yeah, look, there's dishonesty for sure. There are unethical people. Nancy Pelosi, Martha Stewart, but it's small.
World Economic Forum, do you reckon they actually believe in their agenda and they're trying to do right, but they're confused at the same time?
I think that's right. I think generally, you know, let's take Bill Gates. So it's very easy to go online and find all this stuff about Bill Gates is sterilizing women in the Indian subcontinent.
I find that hard to believe.
But there's a lot of stuff
mosquitoes. He's letting off the mosquitoes.
And there are all these conspiracy theories and, like, you know, whatever. From my reading, I think Bill Gates genuinely wants to make the world a better place and is genuinely willing to commit billions and billions of dollars that he managed to accrue by, you know, developing Microsoft and changing all of our lives, by the way. Whether or not what he's doing is, you know, correct. Like, but maybe Bill Gates comes. There's a like a YouTube video, like Who is Bill Gates or something, which is quite well known. Like, it basically is a massive hatchet job on what an evil, you know, his father was a eugenicist who basically believes that, you know, the population of the world should go down, and, you know, but I think, you know, if you believe the population of the world probably should go down, and you're willing to implement policies and do things as a very, very wealthy person that bring that along, as long as you're not like, because I don't believe he's like the Nazis. He's not actually killing people. But he's not pushback. But the only argument I'd give is, you see, like all these films. Like, I'm going to compare it to Avengers. Have you seen Avengers? Yeah, so Endgame. You know, Thanos. Yeah,
he believes he's trying to do the right thing for the world, but humans and
by killing half of all species in the whole universe.
Because the human race will eventually ruin itself.
Yeah.
So he might be thinking he's doing the right thing. But he could be say for instance he wanted to wipe out half the world because he knows there could be a famine in 100 years. So if he wipes out half the world, it will save the other half of the world. Not that he's doing that, but if he was doing that, we would obviously go, that's evil. You got to let humans decide. Like they did in Avengers. They said, oh, you got to let humans make that mistake. But I found us was like, look, I've seen it play out. Snap the fingers.
It's hard as well because I feel like the people that come up with these conspiracies, we get information a lot slower than, say, like the information you probably know to what I know is completely different.
Yeah,
you're on a different level to what I'm on a level. So sometimes it's hard because the time you get information is
too late.
It's too late.
But you know, wow, we can go down so many rabbit holes here. So do you know all this stuff about the creation of the Federal Reserve, right? Which is actually private. Exactly.
Yeah. I read it.
Very impressed. Very impressed. Exactly. So that comes up a lot, right? Basically, it's like the Astor family and, like, you know, all the global elite, the Rothschilds. They set up this thing so they could all become ridiculously richer than everyone else and control the world and blah blah. And it's like, okay, there's a slight problem with that, right? Let's go back to first principles. That was founded in 1914, 1915, 1915. Yeah. Okay, so what has happened to the human experience since 1915 for most people? Is it better or worse?
Better.
It's like fucking ridiculously better. Like, there were no football stadiums in 1915. There was no leisure travel. People didn't go on holiday to another country. Like, you know, families, if somebody left China to go and work on the other side of the world, they'd never see their family again, like, because it was a 6-month sea voyage. Like, air travel, whatever, you know, the fruits of modernity are incredible, and modernity has happened. Scientific progress, human progress. You know, not everyone's lives have got better, but most people's lives have got better, even in Brazil or Nigeria or whatever, you know.
Human civilization's come a long way.
It's come a long way. Yeah. And actually, one of the key reasons for that is financial markets, right? And one of the key reasons that financial markets work, bond markets and equity markets, is because of the establishment of the Federal Reserve and fractional reserve banking and all this stuff. So, you know, the whole Gates question, like, if he thinks that it would be better to kill half the world's population today because it will be better, that's immoral and unethical, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or just a good human being, right? We don't even need religion to decide on that sort of ethical. I don't think we do anyway, right? But you know, and I don't think he's doing that, and I don't think any of these people are doing. They're not actually going out and trying to exterminate people. And I think even in a world of,
well, we don't blame Elon Musk for going to Mars, but I think because Bill Gates operates and does things for people, it's easy to say, oh no, he's a bad actor because he's giving all these people this and he's a billionaire. It's easy to attach. But when we look at Elon Musk going to Mars and he wants to take people to Mars, it's like, oh yeah, this is the great thing.
It's inspiring.
So that's where I said that the information what people get is
well, and that's right. And I think, and you know, we live in an era where it's never been easier to produce, you know, to shout about something on social media. You know, a lot of people comment on stuff they don't understand. Like, they really, like, I mean, obviously I see that in financial markets all the time. Like, the number of people who have really strong opinions about financial markets, about how stockbrokers behave, about investment bankers, about whatever the politicians in with them. And I just know it's complete bollocks.
Do you just read a lot of it and just think, this guy does not know what he's even saying right now?
25 years of actually being on a trading floor and actually being in an investment bank and actually meeting millionaires and billionaires and raising money for companies and thinking, and by the way, without I don't want to sound like too much of a pretentious wanker, I'm not far off having read 1,000 books on history and economic history and economics and trading and markets and philosophy, a lot of other stuff. And, you know, without wanting to sound like too much pretentious wanker, it's like, oh, I've read more books than you, I know more than you do. It kind of is true. Like, if you, you know, if you're going to come at me when you don't actually know what the word equity means, you don't know what a share is, but you have a strong opinion about the stock market and the history of stock market. You don't know the history of stock markets. You don't know why they're invented, and you hate investment bankers. I'm going to think you're a fucking idiot.
But that's the thing, is because it's easy to do that nowadays with social media. Whereas back in they would have to come to your face and say, I don't agree with you because of this, which would give you the opportunity to say, well, this is how it works, and you could have a debate. Whereas online, there's no debate. It's just like, you're a dick, you don't know what you're
about. That's right. But and the other thing, I think so my next book, so it's called Our Future Is Biotech, and it's kind of half why I'm really excited about the world and really positive about the world, because I think exponential problems like climate change have exponential solutions, and biotech is where those, because most of our remaining problems as a species are about biological systems, right? Curing cancer, environmental degradation, and biotech's going to sort that out. It's also kind of half a personal development self-help book, because it's like all this stuff we now understand about microbiome, you know, like about exercise, about sleep, about alcohol consumption, all this stuff. I mean, you guys are really into fitness and the gym and stuff, right? So you will know a lot of this stuff. But I genuinely believe, why do we have a pandemic of nonsense and a pandemic of anger and keyboard warriors? Because too many people are fucking unhappy.
Yeah.
And the reason they're unhappy, and there's so much literature around this, is the reason most people are unhappy is because they never actually proactively try to learn what makes you happy. And sitting on your ass watching television 6 hours a day, like, there's a difference between pleasure and happiness, right? And you know, we live in a culture where a lot of people are unhappy because they're making really, really bad personal choices and they're not being told. And that I'm fine. You know, why do I care about this? Because of biotech, because of finance. Because 90% of people in this country don't have a stocks and shares ISA. They don't know anything about the financial markets. They don't know anything about shares. And then they go, fucking rich people, they're fucking rich. It's like, they're not rich because they're rich. They're rich because they bothered to learn about financial markets, which you can do too, by the way. And so then they're unhappy with rich people because, you know, the wankers are rich. It's like...
But like you said, they're the same person that's sitting on their sofa watching the news, not doing nothing about their life.
Yeah, but and I think, look, I mean, to be fair to a lot of people, because don't want to sound like some sort of horrible, disparaging arsehole, you know,
just gunning people down.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you know, there's personal responsibility, but that, you know, well, we've gone so far as a society that we've led people, you know. But do you know what? The good news is, though, I perceive if people are willing to curate the right content, there's never been more really great information out there. Like, if you know, Lex Fridman or Tim Ferriss or who's that guy, Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. You know, these podcasts. I genuinely think that some of those podcasts, guys done like hundreds of podcasts that are like 2-3 hours long with the world's leading experts in, you know, psychology, like how to be happy, you know, how to be fit, how to be healthy, how to learn about financial markets. The fact that that stuff's all out there for free.
There's abundance of knowledge.
It's amazing.
As long as you can differentiate the right from wrong. But that's where I feel like you have to listen to both sides of a story.
Yeah.
If someone says something, like COVID, for example, there was only like one agenda on one side. Well, I want to listen to the other side. Oh, but you can't listen to the other side because now everyone's been shut off.
That I agree with.
We go,
and
like,
that
it's what I don't like.
Conventional media is definitely it's fascinating, isn't it? Because what makes me laugh about conventional media a lot is how many left-wing people call it the right-wing media, and how many right-wing people are like, it's the fucking left-wing media. And it's like, who, you know, choose your poison, right? And I think certainly, I mean, again, I'll be careful to say I've got a really good mate who's a newsreader at the BBC. But, you know, I stand listening to Radio 4 in the kitchen at home. Listen to me, Radio 4. You know, it's like an embarrassing thing to admit to, but you know, and I just cannot get over how bad, like the stuff they choose to focus on. Some government minister's done some bloody irrelevant thing that doesn't affect most people's life, you know, and they're going to get really angry about it and ask them gotcha questions. And like, I think the quality of conventional media is rubbish, which is why it's much better to go to podcasts. I definitely shouldn't say this because now I'll never be invited on the BBC. Right, some of it's really good, but you know, it's like, I think that point about COVID is a good one, because the trouble with that is when conventional media is not telling both sides of the story until 2 or 3 years, you know, all the stuff about how lockdowns were fucking ineffective and a ridiculous policy, that was completely stamped on at the time. And to some extent you could credit what, because the people who believed the lockdowns were going to save millions of lives and like fervently believed that, you know, obviously that you could again, it goes back to the Bill Gates.
That's what I mean. That majority had a foothold in.
Yeah, but imagine you were in a position of power, either as a journalist or a politician, and you think if we don't manage to lock down, 2 million people are going to die in Britain. If you actually believe that, then you'd be forgiven for like trying to stamp down on other people who you might think are conspiracy theorists, even if they're right? You know what I mean?
We had a lot of research from the Spanish flu,
and
so I don't understand why we haven't looked at history. Yeah, because history's the teacher. And it was 100%. There through the Spanish flu, and they understood masks did not work.
Or Sweden at the same time. Yeah. They didn't lock down. I mean, because the other thing they didn't do at all, which is, you know, absolutely unforgivable, is there was no analysis whatsoever of the. So basically, you should do a benthamite cost-benefit analysis. If we do this thing, this many people will die. This many people will have mental health issues. This much shit stuff will happen to the economy.
That's what Robert Kennedy was saying.
Right? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. But if you do this thing, you know, they didn't analyse the counterfactual at all. They just went, lots of people are going to die if we don't lock down. We need to lock down. It's like, okay, how many people are going to die of fucking alcoholism because you lock down, or suicide, or, you know, and they never or stress or unemployment, or, you know, and they never properly did that. And you know, that it is interesting because
it's a very interesting topic. It was truly weird. We were speaking about a guy the other day, and it's just such a.
But I don't blame the average Joe, because they thought they were doing. They generally thought, like you said, people generally thought that if we don't do this, people are going to die. And I have a platform, and I need to spread my message and say, look, this is the right way. This is what people should do. And I don't blame people for that. I blame the maybe the bigger news corporations, the people who did have both sides.
Well, and also it's pretty clear that, I didn't think we'd go down the coronavirus rabbit hole.
Well, we weren't even allowed to speak about it on YouTube 2 years ago. We would have got kicked off, banned. Yeah, we would have got banned.
I never thought about that. But well, there you go.
But that's the other thing.
That's what sort of, when it first came out, it was like you're pushing something onto me. It's not like there's a way of wording things. And listen, we think you should take this jab because this might help you against the infection.
Yeah.
There's a way of wording it, but when you're saying directly,
you can't travel,
have to take it because you can't do this. It's like, whoa, I know a little bit about health and fitness. We're humans, we're sort of the healthiest we've ever been. At the same time, probably the illest.
But it's massively bifurcated.
There's a big section, but it's like now you're forcing it upon me. I don't like this. Now I can't listen to the doctors that I was listening to. They're cut off for mainstream. Now it's like it makes you scratch your head and wonder where's this agenda going?
And then
this ain't right.
Sort of doing propaganda with like when Joe Rogan had coronavirus and he said he took this thing to get over it. I can't remember what the actual medication was. And then they took his photo of his video and they actually put a yellow tint on the video and then put it on like CNN or something like that.
Just changed it.
Changed the tint and was like, he's taking horse tranquilizer. And he was like, bro, whoa.
But again, you know, that's part of the, you know, when I was saying about long form against short form, right? Lots of things in life are characterized by nuance and complexity. It's not that simple. It's not black and white. It's grey. And the only way you're going to be able to interrogate things like this in any sort of sensible way and get the right answer is if you have that level of understanding to understand nuance and complexity, like long form stuff, you know, and you know, if society's all based on a 10-minute
that's like everything in society, really. It's like the hard route. Because it takes time to go do the research and the knowledge when a person who wants life easy and just wants to hear quick facts, they want the quick, short, full.
But that goes back to what I was saying about, like, which is why so many people are unhappy. Because, like, philosophically, like, ever since the Greeks and the philosophers of 2,000 years ago, the Stoics, right? Like, the obstacle is the way. You know, that everything that's going to make your life really good is on the other side of pain and fear. And now we live in a society where we don't have to fight for our food. We don't have to fight for we don't have to, you know, very rarely do you actually have to fight against another human being. Like, so everything's become really comfortable and easy, relatively. And, you know, I know cost of living crisis and people struggling financially and everything, but like even somebody who's really challenged economically right now has a better life than an emperor 500 years ago because they have flushing, you know, running water, hot water and a flushing toilet, you know, and...
But obviously you've read a lot of books. I'm guessing you know a lot about history. Would you say we are on the edge of the civilization crashing?
Yeah, well, do we work in cycles?
Yeah, well,
I've read a book called The Pendulum, and they talk a lot about 40-year Zenith cycles.
Yeah, and Kondratiev waves,
and I feel like we're in a cycle.
There are cycles, but there's also there's circularity. There's also linearity, right? So you know, how can you compare the last cycle, that generational cycle of there's a war generation that fights in the war, then after that they want to be peaceful and they care about their families and they're really conservative, and then the hippies come because they've had, it's like clogs to clogs, you know, the rich, somebody builds an amazing business, they're really rich, their children just about hang on to it, and then their grandchildren just piss it all away and, you know, go clubbing in Ibiza on granddad's money, and then it's all screwed, and then their child then builds an amazing business, and that sort of happens.
It's weird, yeah.
It's true. I mean, it's a well-known thing.
I'm just looking at my generation and my family. I'm thinking, yeah, it's pretty weird, isn't it?
It's like,
well, maybe we're going to be the ones.
It's
100%.
You know, there's some amazing. JP Morgan Private Bank came up with some amazing stat. Like 90% of multi-millionaires' money is gone 2 generations after them, which is why family offices exist, private banks exist, because people are trying to make that not happen. But ultimately, it's in the power of the grandkid who just plays video games and gets drunk because they're super rich and they never had to try for anything, right? So it's like literally 90%. But where are we going with that? So
we're talking about Zenith cycles.
So there's and that happens. So at the private level and at the generational level across cultures, particularly pertaining to war. But you know, the iPhone didn't exist in 1945 or 1939, right? The worlds of all these linear things that are just actual tangible progress are different today. So the same set of circumstances can never be exactly the same set of circumstances because of technology and technological development. And I don't know whether you've heard me, but to sort of go back to your question, you know, are we confronting a sort of epochal change, whatever? I mean, I use the analogy of we're in a race between Mad Max and Star Trek, right? I love it. I sort of flatter myself saying I came.
That's good. That's good.
But we're in a race between Mad Max. So like that, the latest Mad Max movie, you know, that apocalyptic fighting for water, you know, there's that, and then there's the reason I talk about Star Trek, it's, you know, everyone's good looking and like has an amazing apartment and the technology is phenomenal, and the only threats to human beings come from alien species. They're all, you know, it's like a global government and everyone's happy together and whatever ish, right? But it's just a juxtaposition of like a dystopian apocalyptic future and a everyone's rich and the world's amazing future. And I genuinely think we're on a track. There's a chance it's probably going to be one or other of those almost in our lifetimes, because AI, machine learning, biotech, so the technologies coming down the pipe are just unbelievable. Like, we're just going to step change so many things, like power generation. People, the biggest threat to our to the environment is basically agricultural, right? And the agriculture industry, like livestock farming, everything.
That's why a lot of them are striking at the minute.
Well, exactly, in Holland and all over the world, and that's right. But you know, it's like the Luddites in the 18 whenever. But you know, I think that technologically we're going to become so efficient at crop and food production in the next century from all these new technologies that you'll be able to rewild like 95% of the land. Like the Amazon rainforest will, instead of losing the size of Wales every year, it will go back to being what it was 100 years ago, and that's going to happen all over the world. There's already early signs that's happening.
It's like we're going fast forward and now we're like reversing. Technology will sort of reverse us.
but so is there a chance that, you know, 100 years from now there are 2 billion people on the planet who are peaceful and really rich? By the there could be because well,
I feel like throughout human history there's never really been a time though, has there? You always get there's always some bad actor.
Well, yeah, okay.
Not unless you have like a decentralized AI where everything's fair.
Compare.
Will it always be an outlier?
But you know what? So what I just said, right, is about the same as if you'd been in 1850 and we were doing this now with big top hats and frock coats and sideburns and
maybe
whatever.
A pipe or something.
Yeah, exactly. a massive pipe,
man.
So you know, in 1850, well, Thomas Malthus wrote a book in 1798 which basically said that mankind was going to population growth was going to strip our ability to feed the world, and there'd be war, famine, pestilence, and sort of the end of humanity. And then even Charles Darwin was saying similar things in the 1840s, and Queen Victoria was really worried about overcrowding and overpopulation in London. And if you'd been able to put them in a time machine and bring them to 2024 and say, look at the world, to them it would look like a fucking magical paradise compared to what it was in 1850 when everyone had, you know, dysentery and cholera and scurvy, and like we were at war in 10 different parts of the world. And you know, so what I just said the world could be like in 100 years, and your immediate reaction was not chance. That's every period throughout history. If you'd said to somebody in 1750 what the world would be in 1900, they go,
that's true, yeah.
And that's one of the most insidious things that we are built to be pessimistic psychologically, right? It's much more powerful. That's why the press is the way it is. And I actually think there's, you know, this is why I've written my new book, Our Future Is Biotech, because Our Future Is Biotech, it's going to, sorry, I'm cocking up the, and I think there's half a chance, other than what you can't legislate for are the, you know, the black swan events. Like if Putin nukes somewhere, all bets are off. But then there's no point in worrying about that.
No, because you can't do nothing about it anyway.
So you might.
That's why I feel like listening to the news is too much for some people, because you need to just focus on what you got to do.
You think about the things that you want to make you happy in life, right? The news doesn't give you any of it, right? It does, and it wastes however much time you spend looking at the news, thinking about the news. It doesn't make you informed. People are like, oh, I have to watch the news, I need to be informed. It doesn't make you informed. It gives you a massively, massively distorted conception of the way the world actually fucking is. Like, because like I said earlier, 99.999% of people yesterday had 24 normal hours, and they didn't die in a bomb or, you know, fight on a, like, but the news tells that story, and I think that's one of the most corrosive elements of modern culture. But to the point, you know, not only are we Mad Max or Star Trek, but if it's going to be Mad Max, okay, buy 100 big bottles of water, and a load of tuna and baked beans and, you know, a farm and learn how to fish and skin a rabbit, I'm going to go on a...
I was saying this the other day, like, about going on these sort of little things, like to create fire, just because you never know, man. Because they're talking about the next big thing could be with the power grids cutting out and all this sort of thing. And then it's like, well, all these natural things we would have been able to do 50 years ago.
You can't do any of them.
None of us can do it now. So there'll be more valuable skills then.
You know,
so about solar storms,
and like you said, it's always something the average Joe cannot control.
But ultimately, yeah, your reaction to that has got to be, you know, tangibly all you can do about it. Like, you can't. There's no point in being angry about, you know, what Putin might do or going on social media fucking Putin. Like, get over it. There's nothing you can do about it. Electorally, you know, whatever. If you worry about an apocalyptic outcome, you can learn how to skin a rabbit and make fire from sticks, and I will do that, because but, you know, to be honest, if there is some horrendous apocalyptic outcome there, you probably just want to drink a couple of bottles of scotch and, you know, go.
It was a good run.
Yeah, well, yeah, because you're going to have life's going to be horrendous. Like, it's going to be like it was in 1500, right? Except worse, because at least people out there knew how to farm, you know. But anyway, but you can't, other than taking those few random steps, I don't think you can live your life looking over your shoulder metaphorically as if that's going to happen. And actually, if you live your life, and this, I bring it all back to, why do I feel this way? Because I've always looked through the prism of financial markets, right? And I think it's one of the biggest tragedies in contemporary culture as well, apart from the news, is 90% plus of people don't understand what financial markets are, what they can give you. So they're not doing it, and then they're struggling financially. And it's like, what a fucking failure of our education. Because we invented them 2 centuries ago, and everyone who's got involved with them in that time, sensibly and understands them, has had a much better life. And actually, a huge part of it, the reason inequality exists is, here's a mathematical idea for you. 3 people all start with 100 at 25, let's say, right? And 100 is like work ethic, intelligence, health, and money. And so it's not like 100 quid, or it's just a sort of thing of 100.
Like a bar of different.
So if one of them gets 1% better each month consistently, they read, they work out, they eat well, they don't drink too much booze. By the way, I drink too much booze, you know, but like, you know, they're just really conscientious and hardworking and whatever. The other person just stays the same, like, and one of them is really lazy and doesn't do anything and gets like 1% worse. So the top one gets 1% better a month, because you can almost do that with investment, right? And you can certainly do it with personal development. Like, if you read a book a month, you're probably 1% better a month, right? One of them is flat, and one of them, it gets 1% worse a year, because gradually they, you know. What's the difference mathematically between their numbers on a 20 or 30 year view? Because after 5 years, they'll still be mates, they'll still be going to the pub together. You won't one of them will have a slightly better job. One of them will be getting
start seeing the changes little by little there.
10 years later, you still can't see them. But when they're 65, one of them is going to be 390 times richer than the one who's flat.
See some guy talking about today on Twitter. 1% every day he talks about.
But this is what people are really bad at. Exponential progressions. People, like, if I say to you, how far is it? If you took 30 steps, how far are you going to travel? 30 meters or whatever, 30 yards, right? If I say 30 exponential steps, so 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, you go 30 times around the world, because that's the power of it. And so 1% changes, tiny little changes each month, and nobody gets taught this stuff. It's like, you know, that person's rich because they're an arsehole. No, they're rich because not only have they got 1% better for 30 years, the reason the rich are really disproportionately rich is because if your great-grandfather and your grandfather, notwithstanding what we said earlier about they lose it, but you know, the richest people in the world, look at Taylor Swift. Here's a random example. Isaac Newton, that expression, standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, if I could see further, it's only because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So making a point that everything that's gone before, if you benefit from everything that's gone before, it has a huge impact on your life and scientific progress at the level of society. So Taylor Swift is the only billionaire female pop singer of all time, right? And her dad was an MD at Merrill Lynch, right? And so now you might think that doesn't matter, but it really does matter, because when she was 12 and said, Daddy, can I have a guitar? He went, here's a fucking nice guitar. Daddy, can I have studio time? Sure. Daddy, can I have my own studio at home? I don't know whether she actually had that. Because he worked his arse off. Or look at the Kardashians. Like, what was their dad now?
He's an athlete, wasn't he?
Right, he's an Olympic gold medalist. So what does that mean about, cash, work ethic? So it's like...
Kylie Jenner, billionaire.
So getting 1% better over 2 generations is why you have these massive outliers, right? Because it's the maths. Like 1% better each month, you can't really tell the difference after 10 years. After 100 years, you got the Rothschilds and everyone else, right?
Because it's compound.
Yeah, it's the power of compounding, and very few people understand compounding. But and that's all sounds a bit esoteric, but it's like, learn about compounding for your own personal life. That's why I obviously write these books. It's like, the pushback on that is you can't fucking guarantee I'll make 1%. Of course you can't. But you've got, the S&P's just done 10.42% from January 1923 to December 2023. It's century. It's averaged over 10%.
And the good thing with it is, it's like you got companies like BlackRock and all these mega companies. So you're trusting them with your money, but I would trust them with my money.
Well, do you know that's brilliant news? Given we've gone conspiracy theory,
we went hard at the start. First hour, the plane was turbulent.
But
I could have carried on that.
Yeah, same.
We can do more. But here's a lovely one: the pandemic of nonsense. That's another piece I want to write. Is a pandemic of nonsense, right? The real pandemic we confront nowadays is nonsense. So there's this. Or if you go online and Google like BlackRock, Vanguard, you'll find all these people going, fucking BlackRock and Vanguard, they're the most twisted, because they own 8% of all companies, or whatever it is, which just shows that people don't understand what they do. Because BlackRock is just, like you said, Vanguard gives tens of millions of people the ability to buy shares in the S&P 500 is, the 500 biggest shares in America. So you might have 10 grand and you use your Vanguard account to put 10 grand into 500 American shares. It's a brilliant invention. You guys know about it. It's great. So if you add up all the people who are doing that in the world, they've got billions and billions and billions. It was actually Vanguard's like $9 trillion or whatever it is. But people who don't understand that at all, and I've seen people on the streets of the city in London, like outside their office going, fucking BlackRock, like tying them, signing themselves. It's like, dude, you literally don't understand what these people do. Like what these people do, they don't. All those trillions of pounds. There's nobody at BlackRock going, I'm going to support the oil industry with this money. I'm going to decide to put X billion into Shell or BP. It's not doing that. They're just a mechanism for millions of people to have a little bit of Shell or BP if they want to.
Vehicle.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's like, it's just tragic that people have such a poor understanding of what that actually is. They can't even get it.
There's a narrative they're evil.
Yeah, well, it's like
coming for you.
But it's like things like the COVID thing. One of the things is Bill Gates has got $600 million invested in healthcare companies, for example. Yeah, okay. Let's just keep the maths easy. Let's say he's worth $100 billion. That means he's got 0.6% of his NAV in healthcare companies. Healthcare companies are like 25% of the stock market. So he's actually 50 times underweight healthcare companies. So you're saying he's got $600 million in healthcare companies, it must be a conspiracy. It's like, no, dude, he's got a 50th of what he should have in healthcare companies if he just was in line with the market. And it's all this stuff, like people just don't realise how little, that they just don't fucking understand what they're talking about, and then they have strong opinions.
It's the information.
So let's say you were Prime Minister tomorrow, for instance. Not that you'd want to be, but if you did want to be, I don't know.
I definitely wouldn't want to be. I have to be really dishonest all the time. That's the problem with democracy.
Yeah, but let's say you were Prime Minister tomorrow. What steps would you change to ensure that people got the right financial literacy, or to sort of change their economic
potential and outlook? Yeah, well, the problem is that it's going to take quite a long, like anything, when the rots set in, it takes a long time to turn the supertank around, right? It's philosophical, it's societal, it's economic, it's everything else. We've basically now live in a society where the governments all over the world have printed shitloads of money and hundreds of billions of QE, and everything is, everything is about debt, not equity, or too much is about debt. And so to turn that around, it's going to be very painful medicine. But I think if there was anything sort of panacea thing you could do, I shared it the other day in my latest YouTube video. There's a petition right now to Parliament to make financial education compulsory from primary school age. Like, people should know this stuff. And so I think that would be a really good thing to do. But you've got to wait 15 years until those kids are actually adults or whatever, right? But I'd make financial education compulsory, and I'd actually make life education compulsory. Like, people really understanding. People are getting better at this, and particularly your age. But nutrition and going to the gym, but there's an epidemic of depression. People are depressed. People are angry, and no one's equipping them with all the sort of laundry list of things to do in your life. A lot of which are 180 degrees the opposite of what most people are doing. Like, most people, I'm depressed, I should go and see a doctor and then have therapy and take Prozac or whatever. And, no, you need to change your diet. You need to walk every day. You need to sleep. It's
because the guy we had on the podcast the other day, he was saying, like, we love excuses.
Yeah.
We want to make an excuse for everything. We're just lazy. And the hard route is honestly going to make you feel a lot better.
And that's the irony is that it's that very thing that makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
It's like, sort of, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to articulate, but there's sort of...
It's like happiness equals unhappiness.
Yeah, well, so the
grind
record
equals happy.
People who get given 10 million quid, who haven't had to do anything for it, like, well, there's the classic. I always say, like, 70% of lottery winners are bankrupt within 5 years of winning the lottery, right? So there's 20 million quid. Their lives spiral out of control. They have massive substance abuse problems. They fall out. They get divorced. They hate their brother. Their life goes to shit after they, dream come true, here's 20 million quid. Like, why is that? Whereas somebody who's actually built a business and ends up being worth 20 million quid is delighted and goes on to start charities and say, and that's a sort of...
I feel like that's the groundedness of discipline. You're disciplined within yourself. It's like me and him were speaking about it the other day. Like, you could just go out there every day and eat Domino's. You could go out there and choose to eat this and eat, but how does it impact the way? Because eating all comes down to how you're going to feel.
Yeah, 100%.
Are you going to perform the next day 100% if I eat this Domino's? No, you're not. It's just the fact.
Because I was saying to him, it sort of hit me when I was 18 and I was walking through like the town centre. I was doing something and it was just on Monday and it was like 12 o'clock. And I was like, I could, if I wanted to, go and have a beer
right now.
And
there'd be no
drink. I could. My dad's not going to say no. I'm 18. I can do what I want. I'm legally. I can go and have a beer right now. 12 o'clock. But I feel like there's some morals you probably should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Like, I could have a beer at 12 o'clock, and I could have a beer every day, every hour if I wanted to. Shouldn't probably do it. Domino's, I could eat it every day, but shouldn't probably do it.
It's the ability to see through. Like, there's a difference between pleasure and happiness. Like, pleasure, like going and drinking loads of beers is pleasurable. Drinking a bottle of wine is pleasurable. Eating McDonald's or Domino's or whatever is pleasurable. Doesn't make you happy. They're two different things. And if you have too much pleasure, you fuck your happiness.
Again, it's the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's short form content is exactly the same.
There was something else I was going to come on to which has gone out of my head, but I'm sure we'll get back.
Do you think you are the way you are then? How you view the world? Is it from a young age as you travelled? Do you feel like that had a big impact on the way? And obviously, your dad set the curiosity throughout stuff. But do you think travelling and being all over set a tone as well?
I think that definitely makes a difference.
Because you're open in all aspects.
Hopefully, well, although I
worry 100%, but your mind's very like you can bounce. I
worry though. I'll watch this back and I'll be like, oh fuck,
pivotal.
Because, but also just being, everyone should just fucking pull their finger out and be disciplined and their life would be better. It's like it's not that easy, right? And I get that, but and I'm definitely not perfect, right? But I think traveling helps. I go back to reading. I think nothing. It's funny, like. People over the years where I've been potentially in a position to give them a job and they like freely admit to me, I'm not really a reader. I'm like, you've just fucked. Like, I'm never going to employ somebody who says to me, I'm not really a reader.
It's like, funny because I'm dyslexic. I went to a dyslexic school and I put off that book for ages.
Did you listen to it though?
No, I put it off. And he kept saying to me, you have to read it. And I was thinking, I was down the wrong path and I just weren't reading. And like I said, I was dyslexic. I thought, because I went to a dyslexic school, I thought I was stupid.
Right.
I thought, it sort of instilled in me like a disbelief.
It's actually the opposite.
You can't do this. And I remember, I think I was read like to page 20, and I was like, oh wow, like I can't. Like, I was 24, 25 when I read this book,
right.
and I haven't read since school.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to page 20, and I was like struggling to concentrate. I couldn't really concentrate, and I was like, I'm finishing this book because he kept going on. You have to do it.
Nicely done.
And I read through the whole book, and when I come out the other side of it, I was like, oh my god, I can read.
Amazing.
It was that belief.
Amazing.
It's like a belief. It's exactly the same when I done like a marathon. Like, it's that belief, knowing that, oh, it's the unknown. Oh, I can't do it. But you take this step and you do it, and you're like, wow.
There's a great book by a guy called David Robson called The Expectation Effect. And he's just taken all this gilt-edged like psychological research, psychiatrists, Ivy League schools in America like Harvard, whatever, really, really top-end stuff, and basically established that what you expect, like basically if you believe something, it sounds like, oh yeah, if you believe it, you can achieve it, load it. But there's actually proper... It's
like false limitation. I had a false limitation on my brain. That's what I say, like, I was a prisoner to my own brain.
Yeah.
And that's
but even
like,
if you believe that you're unlikely to get cancer and you're basically a healthy person, that's actually more in some ways that's more powerful than what you eat and whether you smoke or not. Like it's insane. Like the power of the mind.
Power of the mind. Yeah, that's what. It's really good. You heard of Dr. Joe?
Yeah. I listened to Dispenza. I listened to him on Chris Williamson the other day.
Yeah, he talks a lot.
Modern wisdom.
Yeah.
But there you go. Modern. Chris Williamson, I only discovered him a few months ago, and he annoys the arse out of me because he's like 13 years younger than me, and he's got this amazing, huge podcast.
Powerful.
And he's really good.
Yeah,
he's really, I'll take
good.
nothing away from
intellectual.
Exactly right. He's super smart. I watched a 3-hour
pod with him the other day, and I was like, the conversation these two are having back and forth. And
was it Alex Hormozy?
Yeah, what a guy.
That's so good.
So I'm reading a book at the minute, Russell Brunson's book, and Alex Hormozy went to one of his events, and that's how he like articulates and how they break down businesses and the niche, and it's like but there's a huge, but it's so simple.
That's right, but there's a huge amount in there about real happiness. Because to go back to your question about if you were Prime Minister, what would you do? Teach people what actually factually, based on scientific evidence, is going to make you happy. Not because I can't remember what was the book I was reading recently. He used to be like head of innovation at Google, Mo Gaudat. He's an Egyptian guy, Mo first name, and then Gawdat, and he did a book called Solve for Happy, and he's basically applying his like computer engineers, I'm a multimillionaire Google genius, to happiness. And it's one of many similar books, but the opening few chapters, like many other books that are similar, are basically saying the biggest problem we have is most people have never thought in any deep way. Like actually say, make a list of things that actually are the things that actually make you happy. And most people have really, really false ideas about what will make them happy. And therefore they do the wrong thing all the time and then they're unhappy. And it also is a downward spiral. Like I think you said earlier, momentum's really important. Like, expectation, momentum.
You'll change along like the process, the journey. I used to think, if I made a bit of money, I'd get this. Until you actually start going through the journey and the process and you realise, well, this is not actually going to make you happy. That's the difference.
Exactly.
Because now your mind's open to a broader array of things and topics. You understand more about yourself.
Yeah. But it's not easy, right?
No, it's hard. That's the whole point.
But that is the point. And I think we've, if in society, we have lost sight of this in a big way. It's like that whole blame culture, I'm unhappy, it's somebody else's fault. It's bankers in the city, or it's that other group of people, or it's that ethnicity, or, and that's just, there's far too much of that, and that's what we need to overturn, definitely.
Well, it goes back to like, I was watching something on YouTube the other day, and I don't know why, but I clicked on it and I started watching it. And it was basically this geezer who fell into a lake, and he was saying that he passed away for like a minute or 2 minutes, and he was explaining what happened to him. So he was like sinking and he was at the bottom of this lake, and he said he went into this dimension where they were taking him around and they were saying to him, why did you worry so much? He, people talk about like DMT and how you know everything and you're in a different dimension. Everything's so clear. And he said it was just they were in like this space and everyone was happy and everyone knew everything and everyone was on the same level, and they were saying like this life was for you to just gain experience and just
before you transition to that.
It's funny you say that, because when you die, they say the DMT molecule
gets released.
Maybe
Who's that? Graham Hancock? Do you ever read any of his stuff?
Yeah, Graham Hancock.
Love Graham Hancock. Bit of Egyptian massive.
I like Graham Hancock.
Yeah, no, I think
people think he's a kook and
he's the same. He's challenged. He's challenged history,
Yeah.
where again it's an agenda. Oh no, we found this, and this is our way. The Egyptians, this is our way of thinking. Well, no, because Graham's now coming back and saying, "Whoa, things were looking a lot different. Things they changed. Humans beings are going back a lot further. Back.
Tens of thousands of years. His I love the thing he basically says about how so Egyptology was basically a bunch of aristocratic English blokes. Their older brother went into the army or inherited the estate. Their second brother went into the army. And then they had nothing left to do and weren't going to inherit the estate, so they became an Egyptologist. And they're basically all kind of proper Muppets with no rigor, and they just went out and sort of went, Tutankhamun is whatever I decide he is.
Well, what they say? They used to say the pyramids were the temples. Well, we all know that they weren't the temples.
And this happens a lot as well, is that people with no credentials at all established Egyptology in 18 whatever, and then it ossifies, it solidifies as the truth. Academically, Egypt. God, we're talking about a lot of random stuff there. But it happens a lot. Is that suddenly that's conventional wisdom, and 100 years later, people are citing these guys, going, "Well, Jones and whatever said about the pyramids this." And nobody ever unpicks the fact that it was all nonsense to begin with, because now it's been 100 years of people referring to that stuff. And I think that happens a lot as well, which means you...
But again, that's the same, we could say throughout history. I started learning about the Mayans and the ancient caliphs. And I didn't realise how, where was it? Iraq, and that one day was the powerhouse of the world. And how
Sumerian culture.
Yeah, the Quran and the Sumerians. I'm like... Well, everything I learned about history,
never.
I don't even want to know about that. I want to know about the Sumerians. They had things. It was
they always say the victorious write history, right?
Yeah.
But that stuff is out there. Whether it's Yuval Harari or but again, I guess
watching The Rest Is History by Tom Holland and I can't remember the other guy.
Is that a TV show?
They're a podcast.
Oh, okay.
But they started putting me onto it, and then I started watching the Dead Man Sea Scrolls.
Dead Sea Scrolls. You're
started going down a rabbit hole.
Hardcore history.
Yeah.
There's another one. He does Sumerian stuff. But it's funny because this comes back to everything I've said is bullshit now, because the slight problem is when you think about all of this stuff, right? I say, just read loads of books, you'll be really smart and happy and have a clue and wealthy and everything else. Trouble is, there are just tens of hundreds of, you could spend your life going reading all this stuff. So I think it's quite hard to, one of the things you have to be able to do is triage what's important to you and what's going to make you happy. Because you could spend a lifetime reading about the Sumerians.
I think you have, you said, you would be fascinated. But don't you think if you're fascinated in different topics, how everything sort of correlates?
Look, it's called there's a great there's a guy called E.O. Wilson who wrote a book about consilience, and it's this idea that we've become society needs to be convergent and consilient, to push the frontier scientifically in biotechnology, like curing cancer or AI or whatever. You need hyper specialist people like chip designers and programmers who are just unbelievably good at this tiny narrow thing, or gene editors, whatever. But actually, to push the sort of frontiers of human experience, you need consilience, which is you need people who have a broad understanding of tons and tons of things and put all those pieces together in one place. So that is. Damn, I've done it again. There was something I was going to say and I
don't know where we went. I went from saying the geezer was drowning in the lake to the Sumerians.
Jesus, how long have we been talking?
Well, we're saying how it correlates, but
I've got a quick question.
Yeah. Oh, well, hang on. Can I just... Yes. I have remembered what I was saying. Because what I wanted to bring it back to is, I was saying earlier, there's just too much. There's too much knowledge. There's too much stuff to read. It's so overwhelming, right?
Information's overload.
Yeah, but the two things I think people should focus on, and obviously I'm talking my own bit, but financial education. Because if you sort your finances out, it's such a tragedy. People don't realise that by the time you're 50 or certainly 60, you should have income coming in from everything you saved over your life. That's at least as much as income coming in from your work, capital and labor. People think that's bullshit and it's impossible. It's only for rich people. That's wrong. Okay, and so the great thing about that is that it makes everything else easier. You're less likely to get divorced. You're less likely to be challenged with mental health. You're less likely, you have some more cash. That's why financial education is so important. And the other one I'd say is like physical and diet, nutrition, and exercise, right? Because that's really badly understood by a lot of people as well.
Yeah, because it's like like I said earlier, we're going back in time. We're starting to find nature,
ancient wisdom.
Yeah. That's why I like the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, that they're coming up so much now. To Ryan Holiday, like it has a part still to this day. But
it blows my mind, doesn't it? Blow, because I'm exactly the same. I'm a massive fan of Ryan Holiday and Stoic philosophy generally, but the mental thing is when you read Marcus Aurelius, it's like written in 32 AD, or I don't know when it's written, like that early Roman era, and it's like this guy, like what he could literally be my mate.
Yeah,
in 2020, it's like, and you think like exactly. Although it's funny because I think we would have more in common with Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor in 30 AD, than we'd have with a Norman knight in 1100, because I think, to your point, Rome was a high point civilizationally, right? And then it went, and so I think Norman knights, knocking each other around with like massive broadswords.
By then,
they didn't have their Stoic shit down like in the way.
But the thing with this is not even my question, but I'm just going to touch on this quick. But the thing with financial literacy, have you ever seen that film? Is it Timeless with Justin Timberlake?
Timeless.
Yeah.
Where everything... Oh, so they don't have money, they have time.
Yeah.
The more money you have, the more time you actually have.
Yeah.
And I think that is true. That is true. Like,
Correct.
I'm not saying you want to... we need millions because I want to get a Lamborghini and all this stuff. I see time as financial freedom, as more time to spend at home, more 100%. Time to spend with your wife, more time to spend with your kids, more time to do what you want to do,
and more time to learn all the other stuff that's going to make you happy.
That's
more time
that's
to be
it.
Creative, like.
But the other thing I say about financial education is, like, why not learn it? Do you know what I mean? Because like people, it's fucking complicated.
It's gambling.
Yeah. Exactly. Wrong. I mean, you know how you've probably seen my YouTube video, like the difference between investing and trading. And it's a fucking tragedy right now that basically young people go, crypto, trading. And because also trading's a zero-sum game. Like investing's all about just benefiting from human progress. Like, the world in the last century has just got better. Trains, planes, shipping.
People don't realise they can...
and you can have a piece of that.
Yeah, anything can invest in, they always think trading.
Exactly.
And I think I read a study. I think is it like 2% of the population can be successful traders.
Yeah. It's so on IG Index, who do spread betting, they have to say by law on their landing page, their website, 69% of people lose money trading on their platform.
Well, you're under the impression it takes a specific type of person to be a good trader.
Yeah,
there are different. Where there's
I think there's a lot of psychology
massively
to the market.
All the best trading books say the first ingredient in your success is you and your mindset, and a lot of it is about time frame. It's like you can either, one of the Morgan Housel wrote this book, The Psychology of Money. It's really great.
Yeah,
it's great.
I've got it on audio.
He says one of the things that basically all disagreements when it comes to financial markets and trading are around time frame, because you can have someone go, that's a rubbish Bitcoin shit, right? It's rubbish if they're looking at it in the next month, and then it's great if you're looking at it in the next 10 years, right? And it's
is that what they say, when in doubt, zoom out?
When in doubt, I've never heard that one before. That's very good. But but that's true of investing, right?
Yeah.
But I think the other really important thing to get, we're now finally getting out of COVID conspiracy theories and slagging off celebrities.
I love a conspiracy.
Yeah, well, we can do more of that.
Debunking it.
But so it's really important. Like one thing somebody takes away from everything I do about financial education is it's really important to understand it's real, and by which I mean, if you're investing, you're actually investing in. It's not trading like some sort of just intellectual construct of this goes up and that goes down.
Watching charts.
Yeah, you're investing in stuff like companies that are cutting down forests in Finland to make toilet paper to go into your supermarket, right? Like if you think about the wonderful, it's a very pretentious word, but cornucopia of, just think of it. Like if you sat down and wrote down every single fucking thing that you can buy in Boots, Superdrug, Waitrose, Tesco, Currys, just like think about how many thousands and thousands and thousands of things that we have now like hair wax, beer. You know, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? But every single one of those things has created real wealth. And when you're investing, you're just investing in that and all the other new stuff that's going to come along. Like I think biotech is going to be next. Like the company that cures cancer properly is going to be a $3 trillion company like Apple, right? That's real wealth. It's not trading where it's just like, I'm going to rip your face off, you're going to rip my face off tomorrow. Yeah. Like it's really important for people to understand that investing is about having a piece of human progress.
Obviously, the question I did want to ask, I'd just like to take this time to shout out our sponsors at Prime MMA. If you're looking to enhance your MMA skills and learn by one of the best coaches around, head over to Prime MMA now. It's as easy as clicking the link in their bio, selecting your class, selecting your purchase type, putting your email in, and then purchasing. With brilliant MMA and boxing fighters coming out of Prime, it's really the best time to start your MMA journey now. Head over to Prime MMA and let your mixed martial arts journey begin. Before I went down that rabbit hole, was from all the people you've had the pleasure of meeting, obviously you've met, but like you said, billionaires, millionaires, congressmen, what's the biggest lesson you've learned off of someone?
A single lesson?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Or just lesson in general?
Well, like I said, I do want to say again, like in my experience, almost all of those sorts of people have been really good people. Like,
down to earth.
Not always down to earth. Sometimes, it's a few pretentious ones, but like just like mission driven. Like they don't. It's like this idea that a lot of rich people just want the money. But a lot of rich people want the economic power to do the things they want to do. Like Elon Musk's obviously a really good example. He doesn't give a shit. He's worth $500 billion.
They have a vision and that's their path.
Yeah, I mean the guy was worth $300 million and put it all on black and was like negative 10 million for a few months and could have gone completely bankrupt. Like who does that?
Yeah.
Because he's so driven. So it's obviously not about the money. It's not about having 100 Ferraris and whatever. So, and I think a lot of rich people are like that. They don't see money. A lot of other people see money. Who is it? I think it's Morgan Housel says that most people don't want to be millionaires. They want to spend £1 million and show it to everyone. It's like being a millionaire means you've got £1 million of investments that's generating an income. Not that you go, look at my Lamborghini and look at my, because then you're not a millionaire anymore. You've got a Lamborghini, right? You know what? I had a really good answer for the life lesson thing that I did a few months ago in another interview, and it's can't have been that good an answer.
Or like a tip, or just a piece of information that's sort of stuck with you from when you. Well,
I tell you what. One thing that's been really helpful is when I was in my 20s, I was trying to do everything at the same time, like sport, music, job, dating, everything, and it's really, really hard to do that. And I think a lot of people, when you're in your 20s, you probably want to be looking for your significant other. You're going to be dating. That's going to take loads of time and energy and money, and you're going to start off in your career. So your job's going to be probably the hardest it's ever going to be because you're not very good and you don't know anything and you need to learn. And so you probably don't want to do a bunch of other like hobby stuff that you might do when you're older. And I think seeing life in sort of 5-year chunks of like, I'm going to spend the next 5 to 10 years doing this thing. Do life in series, not in parallel, is my point. Because like you can,
chapters.
Yeah, you can drive yourself mental. Like, so for example, at the moment, I'm in a chapter which is 3 books that I'm writing and 2 investment funds, and it's brutal. And what have I sacrificed? Evening meals out. Like I don't go out ever. Like I don't eat out, or my poor wife. There's a lot of stuff that I used to do that I'm not doing. Holidays. I mean, I'm not going. Last year we went to Cornwall for 3 days. That was it. The whole year, and that's completely different to like in my 20s and 30s. But I'll get back, and I'm not going to the gym anymore near as much as I'd like to, and I used to. But once this 5-year thing of writing the books and stuff is done, to your point about money is time. I'll have my time back, and then I'll do that. But I think if you try to do everything all the time throughout your whole life, you just burn out and overwhelm yourself.
I think it's Jocko Willink says it best: prioritize and execute.
Yeah. But he's a get up at 4 a.m. and then you can sort everything out.
Oh, you're on that level.
I get up at 5 in the morning.
Doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But why are things becoming more expensive while wages are still at a low?
Well, that's a good straight out stone cold economic question.
Yeah, I feel like
that's fine.
Well, we can.
Yeah. I was just thinking.
You need to leave by
my kids come out of school at 3:00, so yeah, we're good.
Okay.
But so that's. I think I'm always a bit nervous about having anybody who's watched me on another podcast be fucking hell. It's like I said at the beginning, it just repeats himself. But so people don't understand inflation.
That's how you get your message across.
And it's going out to like their audience.
Yeah, correct. It's different. Exactly right.
They're not going to have seen it before.
But so John Maynard Keynes was the most famous economist of the 20th century, and he said, "Not one man in a million understands inflation." Right? People don't understand inflation, not in any deep way. Right?
That's Keynesian economics.
Keynesian economics is very poorly understood. People think, left-wing politicians think it means the government spends loads of money. It wasn't actually that. So you spend money when times are challenged economically, but you save money when they're not to then be able to spend money. Okay, it's like the biblical feast and famine. What's that?
The Keynesian economics, yeah.
Okay, but yeah, Keynesian, that is John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economics, that's right. And he basically said, not one man in a million understands inflation. And so... a lot of people, so think about it this way, if there's 100 million units of money in the world and 100 million units of stuff, like crops, oil, metal, cars, just to keep the masses, 100 million units of money and 100 million units of stuff that we've made, if the government waves a magic wand and makes 200 million units of money, there's still only 100 million units of stuff. That, like, the fact that they've just said, right, we're going to do this thing called QE, and there's now shitloads more money, which is what they did 300 billion of it in COVID, right? Here's all this new money, but that hasn't caused farmers to grow any more wheat or miners to mine any more bauxite or malachite or gold or whatever, or BMW to make any more cars. So the supply of stuff is basically the same, but now there's twice as much money. What's going to happen? Prices double. Because last year, when there was this amount of money, if we've all got twice as much money, and I want a BMW, and you want a BMW, you're going to go, well, who's going to pay more? That's how market works, right? So, and this is the problem, like, too few people understand what I just said, and they're like, why can't the government just give everybody money? Because of what I just said. Because actually, why shouldn't the government just give everybody 10 million quid? We can just invent money up front. It's going to create real wealth and mean that you have more stuff and a better life. Fuck it. Let's just print enough money so that every single British person can have 10 million quid from the government. Because we've effectively been doing that, not to the tune of 10 million quid, but to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds, right? And so the first thing is to go through the thought exercise. If you gave everybody 10 million quid, a house would cost 20 million quid and a pint of beer would cost 100,000. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't motivate people in the economy to actually make the stuff. That's the problem.
Like real money, how I'm gathering is, say I had a chicken, you had a goat, we swapped.
And then
paper money's just it inflated if it was backed by
so money
a
was
unit of a product.
Money was invented, and it's a really good technology. Like it's another key technology that creates human flourishing. People say money is the root of all evil. It's fucking ridiculous. No, it isn't. It dragged us out of whacking, throwing stones at each other and being fucking poor and having nothing, right? And I mean poor, like to your point. So imagine in a world where it's 100% barter. You've got a chicken, I've got a goat. Well, how many chickens is a goat worth? Like, we're going to argue about that, possibly try and kill each other with a spear, right? But stuff is perishable. So, it's totally unworkable that the day that I happen to have just harvested my barley, I'm going to come to you and go, here's some barley. By the way, what I really need is a chicken or a pair of shoes. So in a barter system, people are just fucking grindingly poor. They're cavemen, right? They have a few very rudimentary tools and life is shit. And you're never going to get science or cars or anything. So money was a precursor, because basically what money allows you goes, the guy who's got the chicken goes, give me this thing for the chicken, and then he's got this thing, and then a year later he could buy the barley or whatever, and it's an interceder in everything that's real in the economy. But we move on, 2,000 years or whatever, and very few people understand that about like what money is. And so then why is gold valuable? Because if you actually think about the fundamental structural things that money needs to do in order to do what I just said, right? It needs to be basically divisible, like, because you couldn't have, lots of societies use seashells as money. The Romans used salt as money. The soldiers were paid in salt, sale, which is where the word salary comes from. But over time, most of these, like certain societies used things like rocks. Like, here's a rock. The problem is you get inflation, because if a pebble is worth a chicken, and there's shitloads of pebbles, then everybody just goes and gets loads of pebbles, and then you're swapping X number of pebbles for who's going to get the chicken. Like, we've all got pebbles. So gold became money because it's quite rare, but not too rare, like diamonds. Like if you use diamonds, if Roman society and Greek society and medieval society and all the societies that basically use gold in history used diamonds, there weren't enough diamonds. So it'd be like you wouldn't have exactly,
because then the more people that were getting produced, they wouldn't have been able to spread the money.
You wouldn't have been able to. Yeah. The economy wouldn't have worked. And similarly, if we used wood, there's shitloads of wood. Like, everyone just chopped down trees, and then all the forests would be gone, and you would. So gold naturally became the fundamental currency because there was the right sort of amount of it. It was divisible. It was portable. And it just became, under the Romans, and it was like 5,000 year history of gold. People figured that out and started using gold as money. And the next step was paper money, which is just like, okay, if I need to use a lot of money and go hundreds of miles away on basically when ships were invented, go to the New World or stuff, you don't want to take a load of gold on a ship and have it sink in a storm and then, it's gone. And Britain was one of the earliest movers on this. You just had a piece of paper that said, look, this represents some gold. So when on a £10 note it says, I promise to pay the bearer, £10 sterling is actually sterling silver. It was £10 of silver. And that worked for years and years and years because of that point about the finite supply of gold and silver. And now we've just got fiat currency, so it has no link to anything tangible.
That's because the asset, the paper money was backed by a physical asset,
exactly,
like gold or silver.
And the gold, we went on and off the gold standard various times in the last couple of centuries. And now there's an argument to say that if we still had gold and silver backing all currency, we wouldn't have the economy we have today, because the economy would have been limited by the supply of gold and silver. It's a very complicated intellectual argument, but you wouldn't have had hundreds of millions of dollars building skyscrapers and massive ships and airplanes, and we wouldn't have this amazing. So I think there's some validity to that argument. But now we've gone far too far, which is that every Western government in the world basically lies to its citizens, because not one man in a million understands inflation, and says, yeah, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you this. And then they give it to you in funny money they've just invented. And then everyone wonders why there's inflation, because people don't fucking understand inflation. So, sorry, this is a good 30-minute monologue.
So what happened, because I know when, obviously, for instance, like sending money to Ukraine or these countries that are in need of money. So how would that work with inflation? Because obviously a regular person would look at that and go, well, they've printed off 6 billion and sent it to Ukraine, so why can't they print off 1 billion and help homeless people? That's what people would say.
Good point. Well,
and I've had that argument with people, but I need to know
the cash going to Ukraine is part of the overall British government expenditure, right? And that is supposed to be within sensible boundaries. And whether they spend it on Ukraine or it's all part of the overall, X 100 billion that they're spending. Now, the other point to make is there are basically two ways government can raise money, right? One is taxation, which everybody kind of understands, and the other is the bond market, which very few people understand. So if you're spending 100 billion a year, but you need, call it $1 trillion, because deficit's 2 trillion now. Well, I'll call it 100. What is it? The British economy is 2 trillion a year or something. The government is, let's say, 1 trillion. It's probably totally the wrong number, but keep the maths. Yeah. It's roughly around that. So if you're spending 1 trillion, but you're only taking 500 billion of tax receipts in, where do you get the other 500 billion from? By selling pieces of paper called bonds to the global bond market, where foreigners go, I'll have some of that, and you pay me an interest rate. And we've been doing that increasingly to fund everything we do for years and years and years. And one of the arguments is that's not, basically we're going to run out of road. And that's how interest rates, now I'm conscious we've been talking for a long time, and if we get fully into the weeds of this, we're going to have to go for another hour. But it's all in my book.
Yeah, just skim.
Yeah, but if we're sending $6 billion to Ukraine, we could have spent $6 billion. We could have chosen to spend $6 billion on trying to solve the homeless crisis. That's just a policy decision by government.
But what would be the incentive? Like, to not in a, I'm going to sound weird saying this, but what would be the incentive to not help your own country first? Is it the way they can get tax back off of it? Like, there must be some
that is just that, you know, there will be enough voices in Parliament, you know, Tory MPs and other MPs and other committees that have to kind of agree as well, otherwise it wouldn't get through Parliament.
Are people profiteering off of this? Companies.
I wouldn't say that MPs or government officials are, but I mean, some of the stories I've heard,
and maybe MPs involved in companies.
There'll probably be some of that. Like Michelle Mone is the worst one of all, right? You know do you know who she is?
No, but I know this is
woman.
She's the lingerie woman.
Who was the woman that got done back the maskers?
So she was a lingerie entrepreneur who got made Baroness Mone, and she basically her and her husband. Well, I've got to be careful not to be libelous.
I actually accidentally watched it. Some lady, interviewing both of them. I can't remember her name.
But you know, it's like, here's a load of rubbish PP. Thanks, we've got 65 million quid. I mean, we shouldn't go down the rabbit hole, but there's definitely a lot of. But if so, there will be people, probably quite sensible people, like on the Defence Committee in Parliament, who will say, if we don't fund what's going on in Ukraine and support the Ukrainian army, there's a risk that Putin will take the whole of the Ukraine and then push further, in World War III. And so their view is that is a higher priority, and whether they're right or not, I'm not saying, but in the round, if our job is to keep British citizens safe, we've got a homeless problem, but we should still be putting $6 billion or whatever it was to support, to fund Ukrainian arms for Ukraine.
I've got a quick one.
How long do you actually have till you have to leave? Just so we can filter through, because there is loads of questions. But we need to just filter through what we want to ask and what we don't want to ask.
I need to leave in about 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Cool.
Right,
okay.
good.
What's your take on the current housing market and the prices in relation to annual salary?
Brilliant question. Far too few people understand that, right? Is the long run, over 200 years of history, houses have usually been between 3 and 4 times salary. So how mental does that sound now? You earn 50 grand, a house is 150 grand or 200 grand. It's like, how is that possible? This has all happened because of money printing, by the way, again. And my take is the cure for high prices is high prices, as the trader would say. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I think what that's another one. People say, house prices always go up. They didn't go up from 1900 to 1965. They were flat. They've gone up since the early 70s because we came off the gold standard and we've printed shitloads of money, right? So it was between real and nominal. Very few people understand that. I'm actually quite bare. So I rent an amazing house, and it costs me roughly 2% of. So I pay in rent about 2% of the notional value of the house because house price is so high, which I think is a really good deal because I could rent it for 50 years. I could rent it until I die, and I would never have.
I watch they rent.
But, but then
I do.
On the back of it, you'd get the average Joe, the regular Joe, for instance, to go, well, why would you rent when you could own it and then have that money back?
Well, okay, because
after 25 years.
Because this is so the housing ladder can be a housing snake, and I think there are an awful lot of. I don't want to just outright predict a big crash in housing. Who knows how? There's a supply problem. That big problem is so electorally. Neither Tories nor Labour for the last 50 years, they want house price to go up because most voters are old, right? So to win the election, imagine if the Tories did what they should do ethically and morally, which is build shitloads of new houses so young people, so we solve that problem. It's like, what is it, 9 or 10 times average salaries now, right? Yeah. And in London, it's like 15 or 18. That's ridiculous, right? And that is terrible for society. It's terrible for so many reasons. I think it's one of the most awful outcomes of policy in the last 30 or 40 years is that you've priced everyone out of the market. And also you've created all this funny money. People think they're rich. Like, I'm rich. I bought my house for £100,000. Now it's worth £1 million. You're not rich. You've still only got one fucking house. Like a million. So unless you want to move to rural Scotland where it's gone from 100,000 to 300,000, you've got 3 times as much rural Scottish house. Yet if you're going to sell that house and you want to buy a house in the same street, you haven't made any real wealth. That's
at the end of the day, with a house, it is an investment. You're buying an investment, which a lot of people don't understand it's an investment.
Well, okay, but so
is that
but
right?
this is my point about housing ladder and housing snake, right? So there are over 600,000 people in Britain today who are over the age of 90. And 15 years ago, there were like 100,000. And it's the same all the way through, like people over the age of 80, people over the age of 70. The biggest sellers of houses generally are dead people, right? Because when you die, your house forms part of your estate. And most of those, living long and being wealthy is quite highly correlated for obvious reasons. Better healthcare, better nutrition, better whatever. So a lot of those 600,000, they're called nonagenarians, people over the age of 90, are like in London and the south of England, in nice neighbourhoods with big houses, family homes, right? So there's going to be hundreds of thousands of family homes, because when somebody who's 93 dies, if you've got more than one kid, unless you have one kid who can afford it or who wants that house, 9 times out of 10, that person becomes a seller of the house into the market, because there are 3 kids and one of them can't afford to buy the other 2 out, and they all want the money. Let's say the house worth £1 million, they want their 300 grand from inheritance, right?
There's the government tax in as well.
That inheritance tax over 325
is that more of a reason as well they would push the housing market?
No, but I don't think
I was just coming out.
No, I'll tell you why, because it's such a small tax relative to all the other big taxes like income tax and stuff. So they wouldn't. It's not something. No, it's an electoral thing, because if you any government that does something which the press then jumps all over and says you have destroyed house prices, like what would be best for British society and most millions of people in Britain? House prices being a third of what they currently are, right? Not just for everyone, for like equality and people being able to live relatively close to their job and not have horrible hour-and-a-half commute on some train. It's so bad for our collective quality of life to have these really high house prices. And the only people who benefit are old people, and it's a pretty ephemeral benefit, right? As I just said, because they haven't made any real wealth in terms of actual house, progress on house prices, of what the number of houses they could buy. But any government that does that, and then the press is that policy, like you just built 500,000 new houses in the UK and house prices have fallen loads, which is what would happen. Isn't that great? No, because Tories get in by loads of 75-year-olds who have expensive houses voting for them, right? And actually Labour have got to be really careful of it too. So until there are too few young people that are voters. Lots of young people don't vote, and there are fewer young people than there are in Britain. There's shitloads of old people in Britain, right? So old people benefit from high house prices. They're the people who win elections. No politician's ever going to take this. That's the problem we're in, right? It's a pretty intractable problem. That's the problem with democracy. Winston Churchill said it's the worst form of government ever invented, apart from all the other ones, which is kind of true, right? So, but the reason I think the market, the cure for high prices, is that governments are going to start struggling to hold this back, is that 600,000, 90-something people are going to die in the next few years, and most of them are going to be sellers of houses, right? Following that, X million people in their 80s are going to start dying and selling houses. And there's just going to be this, I don't think any amount of immigration and Syrian refugees and people coming to this country, they're not going to be buying £2 million houses in Hampshire or Surrey or Devon or whatever, right? So I think there's just going to be this massive oversupply of...
I was going to say, because we're building a lot of houses.
Yeah.
We're not building anywhere near enough, though.
No.
No.
Oh, we're not?
No. That's why there's such a big rush.
Yeah, that's why. So we're adding a huge amount to the population, mainly through immigration, but we're not. So that's why prices are going up, because there's partly because of interest rates, which has obviously changed in the last couple of years, but there's a lack of supply, and there's whenever there's loads of demand and not enough supply, price goes up.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the supply dynamic's going to change.
It'll flip.
Yeah.
It's going to flip.
We end up producing too much, and
well, just look around. So where I live in the middle of Hampshire, right? And there are so many houses around me, family homes, that are currently lived in by really old people, and when they die, those houses will go on the market, right? And like I said, 15 years ago, like 150,000 people over the age of 90 in the UK, now there's 650,000 people, because its population's aging. That's going to be hugely negative for house prices, in my opinion, because they're all going to be sellers.
Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, what's your thoughts and opinions? Is it a fad, or will it stand the test of time?
I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend I know. I think it's really, all the stuff I was saying about gold earlier. Obviously, Bitcoin plays a similar role. It's a digital role with a 12-year track record or 15-year track record, or whatever it is now.
Have you read the book Bitcoin Standard?
I have read half of it.
Oh, okay.
And I've read Dominic Frisby's book, the original Bitcoin book from 2014. Excuse me for a sec. God, you can tell I've been talking too much.
I could talk you for days. I could just like
be one of them old Patrick McDavid pods, 5 hour man.
I'm not going to come home and pick the kids up. Sorry. We only have one car in our family, so that's why I've driven up, and I need to go and get my little girl and little boy from nursery. But look, I think I genuinely sometimes get like people attack me for you fucking bearish crypto. I'm not at all. It's all in that book, actually. I wrote 10,000 words in that edition of How to Own the World. I just think that it's a super interesting technology, blockchain, blah, blah. There's obviously a monetary, all that monetary arguments we've just been making are bullish for crypto, because somebody needs to disaggregate the government's ability to just control money and print shitloads of money and impoverish everyone. Like, why do we have a cost of living crisis? Because we printed too much money. And that's what's really tragic, is that because most people don't understand this stuff, they think the answer is for more money. They're like, oh, we've got a cost of living crisis. The government should do more. The government should give us more money. That's why we've got a cost of living crisis. Like, if you understand the economics, that's the worst. That's like throwing petrol on the flames, right? But, sadly, very few people understand those levers and those mechanisms. But so crypto is really interesting. The main thing I have about it is, like, the internet was really interesting in 1998, right? Is the internet a good thing in 1998? Yes. Right. How many hundreds of .com companies are there? They're all fucking great. Like, if you talk to most crypto nutters today, they're like, everything's great. This coin and that coin and altcoin and that coin and Cardano and Dogecoin and whatever. It's like 20 years from now, there will be two winners, like Apple and Google or Facebook or whatever, right? You have no chance whatsoever of knowing what those winners are going to be. So you probably have a 90% plus chance of being completely hosed, because it might not even be Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? Like, we all know right now, the two Mac Daddy ones are Bitcoin and Ether, right?
It's like in the internet days, there would have been 4 free
Correct.
daddies.
So I remember it well, because I was a stockbroker on a trading floor, Swiss bank, in the .com boom, right? And everyone's like, Excite and Lycos and Yahoo and AOL and there were pets.com and, there were so many businesses. And it was exactly the same. Like, what I've seen on social media in recent years with crypto is exactly what it was like in 98, 99 on the trading floor doing .com. Exactly, like the same psychology, same everything, same sort of messianic like belief. And all I'm going to say is, like, yeah, it's really interesting. It's probably going to create trillions of dollars worth of value, but you have no idea. Like, Nokia was a 200 billion euro company, like in, 2003, I want to say, or whatever. It was like 80% of the Helsinki Stock Exchange was Nokia. By the way, do you know what they used to make? Wellington boots. Like, they made random stuff like agricultural stuff.
Before they got into the phones and stuff.
Before they got into mobile phones. They then became like one of the very biggest companies in Europe. Everyone had a Nokia. Like, remember, watch The Matrix. What does he have? A Nokia flip banana phone, right? Apple, like, so you'd be like, oh, Nokia's like Bitcoin today, right? Nokia's amazing. It's going to own the world. Everyone's going to have a Nokia phone. There's a billion people in China going to have a Nokia phone. A billion people in India going to have a Nokia phone. I remember all the analysts going, Nokia, it's going to be like $1 trillion company. I don't know. I can't remember. It's either been acquired by someone like Microsoft, or it's independent. But last I looked at it was like $4 or $5 billion company. It's still a big company, but it's not a $200 billion.
Not the top. Yeah,
so you've lost 90+ % of your money in fucking Nokia.
Will Bitcoin gain the name of a gold narrative? That's the narrative that everyone.
Well, the other problem with Bitcoin is that, and again, I don't know, but the other problem is there are an awful lot of vested interests that don't want it to work, right? I.e., the US government. I mean, all that stuff I was talking about earlier, QE, money printing, the sort of. If Bitcoin succeeds and realizes the vision that real crypto enthusiasts have for it, it's like a global currency and everything's disaggregated and we have honest, real money, that massively impairs America's power on the world stage. Like, that's really bad for them and others. And so what are they going to do? I mean, if it really gets to that, was to stop the Yanks just going, right, it's illegal to own Bitcoin. Now, the direction of travel is obviously not that, because they've just allowed BlackRock, the ETFs to come out. But
because Trump's saying he's pro Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But does that then, because Russia and China just signed a deal, they signed an agreement
with their own digital
trade in
dollars.
In dollars.
Yeah. There's an awful lot. So this the era since the Bretton Woods, since the end of the Second World War, sometimes pretentiously called the Pax Dollarum, the peace of the dollar, which is basically the dollar is the world's currency, and that gives America hugely disproportionate power, because everybody has to buy dollars in order to buy oil or cotton or coffee or whatever, and that is breaking down all over the world. Like India's buying stuff direct from the Middle East,
and the BRICS. Rising.
Yeah, exactly. The BRICS and the mints. Mexico, India, Nigeria, and Turkey. I don't know what I think it's or Indonesia, because I think India's in BRIC, right? But that's sort of also be careful what we wish for, right? Because the existence of the American hegemon, world leading power with a world leading monetary system, has created a lot of peace and stability. Because them being disproportionately powerful. Partly because we're one of their old school allies, right? If you were Russian, you wouldn't be as keen on that system. But the system's been pretty good given what's happened in the last 50, 60, 70 years, right? And if it breaks down, it makes it much harder for America to kind of exert influence in the world and keep things peaceful, basically.
Did America slightly break it down themselves by sanctioning a lot of countries?
Well, it's like
Does it not help?
There's a great book called Grand Theft Pentagon, which is basically about how the most corrupt, dreadful rogue state in the world is, or it's Grand Theft Pentagon and Rogue State America. But basically, it's like, when the 9/11 happened and all that sort of stuff, 20 years ago, everyone was obsessed with ISIS and, Osama bin Laden and all that was in the news all the time, and it was obviously this huge propaganda campaign. It's like they're bad and we're good, they're bad and we're good all the time, right? And these books are basically saying like the biggest terrorist on the world stage, bar none, in terms of breaching people's freedoms, genocide, are the Americans. Like if you actually really go down the rabbit hole. And that's the point about the historical history is
there.
History is written by the victors. Like, sorry, what was that?
I said the data's there for people to find out for themselves.
There's some horrible stat like American projection of power overseas is like cause more deaths than. I don't think it's quite the Nazis. I think that's probably, but it's a shocking number when you look at all the Latin American countries.
It's not the Nazis, but I think it's how they portray themselves and then what they go do.
Yeah, because the British at least used to go, we've got a fucking big navy. They went to China. I went to Portsmouth Historic Dockyard with my kids and my wife the other day. It's amazing. Like the Mary Rose, HMS Victory, HMS Warrior. It's so cool. It's nuts. It's insane what they were able to build in like 1746 or whatever it was. But like, HMS Warrior, the Brits just parked it in Kowloon Bay and said to the Chinese, here, buy our opium or we'll shoot cannons at, like
yeah.
The Brits were pretty honest about, watch the movie Zulu. We went to Africa and just went, hello, we've got guns, Well, I shouldn't laugh about that because, it's a pretty dark part of our history.
Mad then as well.
But you're right. The Americans go, we're bringing freedom and democracy to, but to be fair to them, somebody made a point. There are loads of bad actors, but somebody said something along the lines of, if you were a prisoner of war in the Second World War, would you have wanted to be a prisoner of war under the? Would you want to be captured by the Americans, the Brits, the Germans, or the Russians? And they said, you ask any person in Hungary, or they would all want to be captured by the Brits and the Americans. Because that actually, to be fair to our cultures,
we had morals.
Way more. There's the Russians would torture people. The Germans obviously just shoot in the back of the head. It's really interesting. So that
our great granddad was a prisoner of war. Japanese 4 years. 4
wow.
years.
Chef
come
on
out.
a boat. Yeah,
unbelievable. But yeah, and that I think there's an element of I don't know. Maybe I've been taken in by propaganda there, but I do kind of
no. I do agree with you on that as well. I'm guessing we got like 5 minutes, something like that. So I'll go with the two sort of final questions that we sort of ask everyone on the podcast. Well, 3. What would...
7.
Squeeze it. We got 15 more minutes. What would you tell 16-year-old Andrew if you could go back about his sort of journey and maybe his fears then?
Yeah, I think the main thing was, although I think 55-year-old Andrew will have to tell 48-year-old Andrew this as well, right? It's all going to be okay, because doing the entrepreneurial thing's pretty scary, right? Like, I'm currently just investing all my life savings to try and make this thing work, and it's and working horribly harder than I probably would like to optimally. But that is a really good prism, because a lot of the time, here's the point: if I went up to my 16-year-old self and went, "Hi, I'm you. These are all the things I've done. You know, this is how my life's gone." He'd be like, "Massive result." You know, like, fucking really? Like, that's your wife? Like, how did you do that? You know, like, thank you, honey. You know, but you know, it's like it's really hard when you're in it and it's your life to really appreciate all the things. Like, when I was 16, I shat myself as to whether I'd ever get a job. You know, like all the stuff I was freaking out about, and it's like, it all turned out much, much better. It's still not what I finally want to be, but it's turned out much, much better. So I'd like him to know that, you know. And I think that's probably all the stuff we've been talking about reading and financial education and stuff. It's like,
you also said it as well, like chapters. Treat them as
exactly. Don't try to do everything.
Yeah.
Believe that even though dating's brutal, like, dating is brutal, right? Like, one of the toughest things I think for a lot of people is finding that other person to get married to or whatever. And it is, I would also say, like, just chill out about that. That'll be all right as well, you know, because I spent a lot of my 20s and 30s like running, you know, just kissing the wrong frogs or whatever the expression, you know, like, and it's really exhausting, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's tough for a lot of people. I think you just need to
I think if you focus on yourself, get yourself into a healthy point, you'll attract.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And how does Andrew Craig want to be remembered? So when it's all said and done for you, you've got the 3rd book out, hopefully a 4th and a 5th.
Yeah.
How do you actually want to be remembered in life?
That's a really good one. So our company mission is to improve the financial affairs of as many people as possible. I would love it if 30 years from now, there's stuff being written about me saying this guy revolutionized people's understanding of finance in the UK and biotech, actually, because I hope I'm right. Like, if you read that book and think about what I said about inflation, I don't want to call myself a futurologist sort of, but, you know, a lot of what I said in there has happened without wanting to sound too smug. A lot of what I'm saying about biotech in my new biotech book, I really believe 10 years from now, people are going to go, fucking hell, like, that random book that he wrote, a lot of that stuff's happened. And a lot of people are going to read it now and go, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I really think it will happen.
You sound like a conspiracist.
Well, it's not. It's just like the pace of technological change. I think people always underestimate it. If you showed an iPhone, like, if you said to me in 1995, in 20 years' time, you'll be able to have a video call with your mate in Australia for free on a phone, I'd be like, shut up. What are you talking about? You know, like, we just completely underestimate.
I think the pace that moves that our brain can't figure.
We can't deal with exponentials, definitely. So yeah, I really just want to have a bit of make a difference, because I think the key, you know, everyone says that it's kind of cheesy, but Britain's becoming a bit shit. Like, I find it really depressing, you know, a lot of what's going on in Britain. And I think the reason for that is people have bad information, and financial literacy is really bad. And like, Britain would be so much better. Like, if, like, 90% of British people don't invest in the stock market. Like, if that number was 5%, Britain would be so much better a country. Yeah. And I genuinely believe that.
And your most euphoric moment in life so far? So the pinnacle of the mountain for you, it could have been a book deal, it could have been something in your career, anything.
It's very hard to remember that accurately. Obviously, I have to say, when my wife was walking up the aisle on our wedding day, or when my daughter Ella was born, and or when my son Oscar was born. But and they're definitely up there. Although it's bloody traumatic when your kids are born, you're like, fucking hell. Thanks for sorting that out, love. She'll love that. But no, I mean, there have been quite a few. Like finding out I got the internship in Washington was pretty amazing, because it was everyone else was so smart. Like everyone else was like full Oxford, Cambridge, and one of the blokes said to me, "Where do you go to university?" I said Birmingham. Everyone was looking at me going, "No fucking way, you're getting into this, mate." And it was great when that, and the other really good one was when that book was self-published, the first 2 editions. And I was literally walking up the hill home from the train station to my house. And I just got this call on my mobile. "Hello, my name's..." And it was this publisher from one of the biggest publishers in the world saying, "We've watched your book, we really like it. Do you want a proper publishing deal?" I was like, Does the Pope shit in the woods? The bears pray? And I was like, yeah, that would be nice. Thanks a lot. So that's good. But hopefully I'm still not out of the woods, mate. There's mixing my woods metaphors there. There's a lot of work to do to get our business to being robustly profitable and really reaching the right audience. So
yeah, that's brilliant. 30-second overview of the new book.
Right, it's called Our Future Is Biotech. It's hopefully coming out in August. And I said it briefly earlier today. Go mad. Basically, all of our big problems as a society and as a species, our problems are biology. So curing cancer, dementia, autism, Parkinson's, like all that, we've got all these diseases in modernity. Diabetes is multiple, all these health problems we have. Curing all of those, sorting out environmental degradation, like rewilding, improving agricultural productivity. Solar power is going to be, we're going to use bio-coated cells to massively improve power. Like basically all of the frontier things that are going to revolutionize the human experience are going to come from biotechnology. And so the book's all about that. And it's about how exciting it is, how new it is. Like there's Nobel Prizes awarded 3 or 4 years ago that are relevant, that are going to change the world, like gene editing technologies, and how we shouldn't fear it. This is another thing, people don't understand it, so they fear it. They think, oh, we're playing God and stuff. It's like, so hopefully people get that. And obviously you want to invest in it as well, right? Because I think the next raft, the next half a dozen $2-3 trillion companies, like when we are 20 years older, from the vantage point of 20 years from now, will be biotech companies, like the Apples and Googles, and they'll be coming from biotech because they'll create so much value by solving all these problems.
When's that book come out?
Hopefully August, hopefully.
I'm going to link everything below. I'm going to link all these books. I'm going to link Plain English Finance. People, head over to Plain English Finance as well. You got the YouTube channel I'm going to put below. There's a lot of content coming out. Thank you for coming on,
mate. It's been really lovely.
It's been brilliant. Like he said, it's been surreal, and to have you on for the 100th episode, thinking we've actually done it for 100 episodes, it's been brilliant. So well, thank you for coming on.
Really honoured, guys, and I think there'll be elements of this conversation that will be like, let's talk about the
first hour was we were going.
We can do another one and get right into the conspiracy theories.
Just good luck with everything you go on to do. We're obviously big fans. We're going to be following your journey, and hopefully other people get to read the book and have the same sort of experience we had.
Thank you very much, guys.
People, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe. We're also going to be doing a few giveaways of the How to Own the World book and live on less and invest the rest. So but
I'll sign a few for you.
Yeah.
And then,
man said himself, sign books from the man.
My wife says they're worth much less when I sign them.
But people, thank you for tuning in, and peace, people.